I'm glad you mentioned those closely watched races, and we may not have a whole lot of developing news here at the top of this next hour, exactly to Robert Gibbs' point. It's early at 10 p.m. in the East, but those are the states closing at this hour, and so in we go. In Iowa, too early to call. In Nevada, too early to call. In Utah, too early to call. In Montana, too early to call. Let's go back through some battlegrounds. In Florida, too close to call. We have it as a slight Trump lead. In Texas, too early to call. Pennsylvania, too early to call. Let's get comfortable here. In Ohio, while we're at it, too early to call. Michigan, too early to call. Georgia, too early to call. North Carolina, too early to call. Arizona, too early to call. Wisconsin, you figuring out a trend here? Too early to call. Minnesota, too early to call. New Hampshire, too early, but a Biden lead as our decision guest desk sees it. Here's the map to 270. This is how the colors lay out across the country. You see the outlier, Colorado. On the Senate side, of course, that was a flip on the Democrats. Let's talk about Senate races. Having just closed, this is a big one. You see how much whopping vote is in there. Obviously, too early to call. The Greenfield-Ernst race. And in Montana, Bullock-Daines, too early to call. The Democrats need 3 seats to gain control. Steve Kornacki, do you have any numbers on turnout tonight?
Well, we're looking at numbers across the board significantly higher than 2016. We're also just trying to look at, I'm looking as you come to me here at North Carolina, and I think you can see, let me get this off the screen so there's a little more clarity here. We've been watching this Joe Biden lead in North Carolina, and I think if you've been keeping a close eye, it's been dwindling, and it continues to dwindle. It's now under 6,000 votes in North Carolina. We think about 85% of the vote is counted. What is to come here? You see about 863,000 votes statewide. Again, there are a lot of votes in, and I'm just seeing if that falls anymore, at 5,900. There are a lot of votes here still to come in places like Raleigh, Greensboro, Charlotte, but they are the same day votes, and we're seeing big differences there. I'm also just checking to see if we still don't have votes in here from Union County, which is a big suburban area expected to favor Donald Trump. So you see Biden's lead dwindling there in North Carolina. You see Biden obviously fall behind in Florida earlier and in Texas. In Georgia, again, Biden is going to need, we got more than half in here, continuing to be a 13-point gap, is going to need monster numbers here from the Atlanta metro area. That brings us, of those 5 states we highlighted at the beginning of the night, that brings us to Ohio, and there you go. You can now see that Donald Trump has taken the lead in Ohio, 130,000 votes. Let me just take a look here at what's left. A little under 2 million. We've got a lot of same-day vote that has come in here. I think there are a lot of places. We were just looking at this off air. You know, we are seeing again significant gaps here in these counties between the votes that were cast ahead of time and the votes that were cast today. I think there are a lot of votes that were cast today still to come in. You could see a place like Franklin County. Look, this is still overwhelmingly Biden, but the number is down even here from what we were looking at earlier a little bit because of the same day vote. Here you go, Delaware County. This is a good example, too. They're basically all done in Delaware County. We highlighted this at the beginning of the night. This is a very good example, I think, because this is sort of suburban, exurban. Democrats talked about making big gains in a place like this. Democrats have made gains here with only about 700 votes left. Trump got 56 tonight. Looks like a little south of 52%. Do Democrats need a little bit more of a gain than this? Perhaps. That's a question you might ask. You could take a look. Lucas County, still a lot to come in here. I believe they've been stuck there since we started looking. Statewide, Trump's lead now sitting at about 130,000. If you look where the remaining vote is, I think we will see Cleveland, Columbus, a little bit less Cincinnati, Let's just check in on Cuyahoga County here. Again, 300,000 votes there. There still are opportunities on this map for Joe Biden. We've still been checking in with Mahoning. That Biden advantage in Mahoning now down to 13 points as more of the same-day vote comes in Mahoning County. So you see Trump's numbers moving up in a lot of places in Ohio with same-day vote. And I just want to zoom out because I think it is a good time to check in on this. We said at the start of the night that there were 5 early opportunities here for Joe Biden in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, and Ohio. I think we have to say it is possible that Donald Trump will do what he needed to do in these states and that he will go 5 for 5. It's possible. He could win Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. We're going to see Texas and Ohio. If he does, where will the action shift? It'll shift certainly to Arizona. Arizona with 11 electoral votes, and then we're getting votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. We're getting them very slowly, very scattered. But again, what Donald Trump will need to do, Pennsylvania must win in that situation. Likely Arizona would be must win for him in that situation. We'll keep an eye on Nevada as well. But the battleground, if Trump is able to go 5 for 5 in these states, that is a big if right now. But if he's able to do that, the battleground will shift. We will be talking Arizona, we'll be talking Wisconsin, Michigan, and really Pennsylvania, and also that 2nd congressional district in Nebraska, which I'm going to try to get a readout on here in a minute.
Steve, before you go to the 2nd congressional district in Nebraska, can we go to Wisconsin and see if what we've got in terms of Wisconsin vote thus far?
You got it. Let's take a look here. Back to live election, and there's Ohio. Let's make our way up to Wisconsin. This is going to take 1 second. Here we go. And again, about 30% of the vote is in Wisconsin right now. Let's see if we got more in Brown County. We're sitting on the same number in Brown County. Here we got a little, okay, this is an interesting, and again, in Wisconsin, we're expecting these votes to be mixed. You know, these wide swings we're talking about seeing anywhere. We're talking about a lot of mixes probably coming in. Sorry, what's that? My producer just, oh. Can I tell you, well, let me put a pause on this because we just got the votes from Maricopa County, Arizona.
Oh.
And this is a big thing in Arizona. When they report them out, they report a ton of them out. Here we go. We got over 2 million votes in Arizona. Okay. Biden leading here. It's about 3/4 of the vote in Maricopa County. Maricopa County is like 60% of the population for the entire state of Arizona. It's the Phoenix metro area. It's a giant suburb. Joe Biden leading this 54-45. Now, this was what you're looking at here are the early votes that were cast up until this weekend. These are going to come in Arizona. We're going to come in sort of 3 buckets of votes over the next few hours and maybe into tomorrow. The first things you're going to see here, they're going to be giant batches of votes like we're looking at right here in Maricopa County, almost 1.5 million votes. These are all, you know, they've been doing early voting for a long time, mail voting for a long time. The last couple of weeks in Arizona, everything that was cast up until about this weekend is what you're looking at right now. Okay, in the next batch, you're going to get same-day votes that were cast today. And in the third batch, you're going to get the latest arriving mail-in votes. There are going to be kind of 3 waves of votes here. This has been expected to be the best wave for Democrats. So, again, it's part of that story we're seeing in state after state. This likely to be Biden's high watermark in Maricopa and in Arizona. And, again, as Maricopa goes, often so goes Arizona. And then the question is going to be these subsequent waves. What does that do? But you're looking at this is often the ball game in Arizona. You got about 3/4 of it right there.
All right, let's stick with this Arizona news because this is a very big deal. As you say, Steve, this is the population center in Arizona. We've got Vaughn Hilliard right now in Chandler, Arizona, which is just south of Phoenix. Vaughn, we want to give this to you in terms of what you are seeing on the ground, what you're hearing from people in Arizona now that we've got this first big dump of votes there.
Exactly. This is what, when we look at the in-person voters today, and this is where Steve said, this first batch that came in, that 75% out of Maricopa County, was expected to more heavily favor the Democrats. In-person voters here today, the number of registered Republicans to Democrats was a 2-to-1 margin. So we should expect Republicans to narrow that gap. And we have long said, whichever way Maricopa County goes, the state of Arizona goes. But there's a little caveat there. You know, folks on both sides, I've been talking to both camps all day, they could potentially, Donald Trump, lose Maricopa County by 2 or 3 percentage points. Maricopa County is about 60% of the electorate. If Donald Trump is able to juice his turnout in support in the rural parts of the state. You'll recall last week, he went up to this town of Bullhead City, Mojave County, a place that he won by 55 percentage points. And those are the numbers I think that we will continue to be waiting to see ultimately how many supporters of his own that did not vote in 2016 showed up to the polls to support him now. The one other number that I think that we were looking at is Pima County there, which is the second largest county. That's sort of been the Democratic bastion of Arizona for a long time, around the greater Tucson area. Hillary Clinton won it by 15 percentage points. And these early numbers here with 80% in show Joe Biden doubling that number. Again, in that last 20% batch, I'll let Steve take it away a little bit more, but in that last batch, we should expect Republicans to narrow it. But at the same time, you'll go back to 2016. Democrats spent almost no money in Arizona. Donald Trump won it by just 3.5 percentage points. And the one other part of the electorate that we should really be looking at here are independent voters. They make up 1/3 of the electorate here. Back in 2016, Donald Trump won them. But what we have seen consistently in polling, dating back to March when Joe Biden became the expected nominee, is that Donald Trump has been losing independents by anywhere from 15 to 20 percentage points. And if that is in fact the case, particularly in Maricopa County suburbs, you are going to see Donald Trump suffering. And based off of these early numbers here, the first 80% in, it seems like that is the case here in Arizona.
Vaughn, let me ask you about a dynamic that I've been sort of acutely interested in as we've settled into the night tonight, and that is what's happening in states that have hotly contested Senate races. In Arizona, we've got one of the Republican senators who Democrats are most enthusiastic about their chances about picking off. That's Martha McSally, appointed Republican senator up against Democrat Mark Kelly, who's been running very strong against her both in the polls and in the fundraising. We've seen a sort of divergence between McSally's expected fate and Trump's expected fate. Has that played a role? Has there been sort of an upstream effect from that Senate race where Democrats think they're going to do so well in terms of making it a little bit of a tougher road for Trump in Arizona?
Yeah, Martha McSally, you're right, had a twofold problem. Not only did she not have the strong support that Donald Trump had among the base here in Arizona, but also was struggling among those independent voters. You know, back in 2018, Martha McSally took her first crack at the U.S. Senate seat and lost to Democrat Kyrsten Sinema by 2.5 percentage points. It is suddenly the Democratic Party of Arizona that had, back in 2018, essentially taken the mantle of independence from the likes of John McCain. And you saw again in this race, Mark Kelly, the former astronaut, the husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, run much like Sinema did just 2 years ago, is that Western, independent, moderate voice. Whereas McSally, she was appointed to fill the Senate seat of John McCain after her loss in 2018, essentially giving her a second go at this, but you continue to see her line herself closely with President Trump. Just last week, you saw her take the stage, and the president, in quite a demeaning way, essentially said, Martha, you only have 1 minute. Nobody wants to hear this. Why? Because you saw her numbers below where his numbers were at. And based off of some of these early numbers, it appears that Donald Trump is outperforming her in the state. And there is the chance that tonight, not only could Arizona pick a Democrat for the White House, but also hand its second U.S. Senate seat to Democrats in just 2 years.
Vaughn, I have one last question for you in Arizona. This may be an unfair one because I know that there's been a lot of changes in the voting processes and specifically in the counting processes in Arizona after they, in 2018, for example, had a really long time before they knew who their Senate candidate was or their Senate senator was going to be. They had sort of a missed call in another statewide race, and I know they've done a lot of work. But we've got about 72% of the vote in Arizona right now. From your reporting there, from being there on the ground, can you tell, do you have any best guess in terms of when we're likely to get the bulk of the remaining vote in Arizona? Should we expect it to be days down the road, or do you think this might be an election night thing in Arizona?
Rachel, per conversations with elections officials, we were expecting upwards of 90% of the vote to come in tonight. Back in 2018, Kyrsten Sinema didn't actually take the lead over Martha McSally until 2 days later. And that is because county officials didn't start counting those ballots until 7 days before. Well, the state legislature, not wanting that to happen again, they moved that back to counting 2 weeks early. The only ballots that elections officials are expected to be outstanding at tonight's close are early ballots that folks didn't mail in, but they walked in and hand delivered. Again, we expect that to be under 10% of the total vote here. So in the scenario that Joe Biden has a 1 percentage point lead, the math becomes very difficult for Donald Trump in that scenario here later tonight.
Vaughn Hilliard for us in Chandler, Arizona, just south of Phoenix. Looks like it's going to be a fascinating night in Arizona as we watch those crucial results come in. Vaughn, thank you.
We have a call from the Southwest, and that is that Joe Biden has been awarded New Mexico and its 5 electoral votes. Thanks to Vaughn and his good reporting, we've been talking about the Southwest since this puts another blue square on the map west of the Mississippi. Nicole Wallace, where do you put states like Arizona right about now?
So Arizona is one of the states that the Trump campaign was most concerned about. From their coalition, it was a state that when Bill Stepien took over from the troubled fellow, I can't remember his name right now, of Lincoln ad fame, Brad Parscale. Brad Parscale. When Bill Stepien took over and he temporarily halted all the advertising and did sort of a deep dive into the polling and looked at where Trump was in states that he'd won 4 years ago, Arizona was the state that Bill Stepien was most concerned about. The diagnosis from the new regime at the Trump campaign was that 4 years of attacking John McCain, both while he was alive and after he was dead, had really hurt Trump there. So this is a state that has felt very soft to a normally hubristic Trump team since the beginning. I'd say this is also a state that the very sort of humble and low-key and expectation-managing Biden campaign, this is the one outside of those 3 Midwestern states that they've had their sights on, probably for similar reasons, as well as the reasons that Rachel keeps talking about, that very competitive Democratic race. Martha McSally's polls have her down today 3 or 4 points, and I think Trump felt that he had sort of pulled to a dead heat there. But this is one that people are keeping an eye on, especially as states like Florida slip out of reach. Most Democrats view that as gone. I know I starting to sound like a broken record, but the focus of the Biden team, the electoral map, the resources, the travel, the campaigning, the deployment of surrogates really was in those 3 Midwestern states. So we should keep an eye on Arizona. I think Arizona is still very much in play. Those early numbers, very good, very competitive looking for Joe Biden. But in terms of must win, it is still, I'm still in the last 20 minutes hearing that the focus is on those 3 Midwestern states.
Let's go back to Brian. I believe we've got a characterization change.
Yeah, these are important. When we feel this way, we say so. So more than just too early to call in Arizona, we are saying too early to call, but Biden leads. On the Senate race there, we are saying ditto, too early to call, but Kelly leads. And this is North Carolina, too close to call. 15 electoral votes. That is our determination at 10:18 Eastern Time. And Steve Kornacki, I am betting you can bear this out. Too close to call in North Carolina.
Is this for me? Okay, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you there. Yes, one of the factors here in North Carolina, you can see Donald Trump is leading this by 26,000 votes right now. There is a lot of vote that is still left to come in Wake County. This is where Raleigh is, a huge county here. I can show you. You're still looking at 110,000 votes to come. Now, I've been talking about there are big disparities between the early vote and the same-day vote, and that's true. Overall, statewide, the same-day vote is very lopsidedly going to Trump right now. However, in Wake County, of the same-day vote that's been tabulated so far, 60% of it's going to Biden, 37% of it's going to Trump. So there is a giant pool of votes there in Wake County that just came down a little bit. So you see that added to Biden's total. There there is a giant pool of votes in Wake County, for instance, where Joe Biden does figure to actually make gains here, which he needs. But you could just see, I'll put the bubbles up again. You can see how big Wake County looms right now, how large that looms. By far, this is your biggest source of outstanding votes in the state. And the other places where you have really substantial outstanding vote, for instance, Greensboro, where again, on the same day vote here, this is Guilford County, but on the same day vote here again, it's better for Biden than the statewide trend has been. You know, also next door where Winston-Salem is, same thing, and Mecklenburg County, where Charlotte is. So there are opportunities here, some big opportunities here, where even with the same day vote coming in, Biden can pick up some votes here. The biggest source still of outstanding votes for Trump, the biggest single source of the map, is going to be the same day vote in Union County. I mean, if Trump is winning the early vote in Union County with 60%, you can expect the same day is going to be much bigger for him than that. But the other wild card in North Carolina is they are going to allow, let me get that back up. I'm pressing all sorts of buttons here. North Carolina is allowing votes that were postmarked by today, to be counted if they come in within 3 days. We don't know how many that could be, but there is a bit of a wild card there with potentially ballots arriving tomorrow, for instance, in North Carolina. So again, when you get this close statewide, Trump at 30,000. When these Democratic areas come in, let's see how much that shaves off. When Union County comes in, let's see how much that adds. And let's see what we can find out about how many ballots might be coming in still to be counted in North Carolina.
We got a call from the South. This is Alabama Senate. And remember how Doug Jones shook the political world when he won as a Democrat. Doug Jones has lost tonight. This is a flip to the Republicans. Tommy Tuberville is the new senator-elect. So Democrats went one up in Colorado. Republicans went one up in Alabama. I was never good at math, but it seems like we're right back to where we started tonight, unless your name is Tuberville or Hickenlooper. We're back to 4 needed to gain, Rachel, for the Democrats.
Let's talk about what's going on in Arizona. Brian, you've just changed the characterization in terms of NBC News' projection in Arizona. In both of those states, NBC News is now, in that state, in both of the closely watched races in Arizona, NBC News is now projecting a lead for Joe Biden in the presidential race in Arizona and a lead for Democrat Mark Kelly in the Senate race. Can we talk a little bit about that Senate race in Arizona? I will foreshadow, or I will cheat and tell you that after this, I would also like to talk a little bit about how that North Carolina Senate race is going, given the too close to call designation now in the North Carolina presidential. But let's start here in Arizona in terms of why the Democrats are characterized as leading in both the Senate and presidential races here. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, you just take a look here in Maricopa County, and again, this is basically the early cast up until this weekend. This is the bulk of the vote here. Biden's advantage, that 54 to 45, that's significantly more than Democrats got in 2016. It was a 2-point margin with this same batch of votes in 2016 for Hillary Clinton. And also, I think when you look at the partisan affiliation of the folks who are going out and voting today, it suggests that may not be enough, even if Trump is doing very well with the vote that was cast today. That may not be enough to overcome what Biden's putting in the bank here in Maricopa County. So that's significant, because just a minute ago, we were talking about a possibility that Trump actually does run the table in those 5 states that we said earlier he was really up against the ropes in. And we said at that point, the action shifts to Arizona. And if Biden is able to put a win on the board in Arizona, then that would be a gain of 11 electoral votes. Remember, Hillary Clinton had 232 electoral votes in 2016. If Biden holds those Clinton 232 and adds Arizona, that would put him at 243. And of course, as we say at that point, if he's not getting anything, we'll still see what happens in North Carolina and Georgia here. But if he's not getting anything out of the Southeast, then we will be talking Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania.
All right,
Brian,
let me jump in here.
Sorry.
2 more projections here. NBC News has determined that when all is said and done, Democrats will retain control of the House of Representatives, and that's all we're saying. And in the state of Louisiana, we have prepared to make a call. When all the votes are counted, as expected, Donald Trump, the projected winner in the state of Louisiana. And as I've been speaking, we have just added Kansas, as expected, in the Trump column. Let's go to the map and see where the colors work out. Rachel, back over to you.
Steve, we're looking at Senate races and presidential races sort of tracking one another in closely fought states. We were just talking about that situation in Arizona, where both Biden and Mark Kelly are portrayed now as in the lead by NBC News' calculations in Arizona. Let's look back at North Carolina. We've got too close to call. It was too early to call. Now it's too close to call in North Carolina. What's happening with Cal Cunningham and Tom Tillis in the Senate race there?
Let's call that up. And you see, again, the numbers a little different here, but 48-4, 47-3, a bit of a larger advantage there for Tillis, about 60,000 votes. Again, I'll toggle between them, and you'll see here, keep an eye on the map here. This is the presidential, and this is the Senate race. Again, Trump's lead in the presidential, 39,000. Tillis's lead in the Senate race, 58,000 over Cal Cunningham. And I think you've talked about this. 2016 was the first time in American history that every Senate race that year on the ballot matched up in any given state with how the presidential race went. There wasn't a single state in the 2016 presidential election that went for a candidate of one party in the presidential race and a candidate of the other party in the Senate race. That's how closely these things have aligned. It's very interesting to see these numbers in North Carolina tonight. You know, Tillis running a little bit ahead of Trump. In fact, Tillis in the polling had been running behind Trump. That had been one of the themes we talked about, and we talked about the potential for a disconnect, a divergence between these two races because of the gap we're seeing. But now, you know, with about 90% in, there's Trump leading by 40,000 statewide, a little less than a point. There's Tillis leading by about 60,000 statewide, a little more than a point. There's a little difference between them, but not much, and also not in the direction the polls before this election were suggesting.
Steve, I got one more for you. We have another call, and this is another New England state, and that is New Hampshire, and it's for electoral votes awarded to Joe Biden. We believe when all the votes are counted, differentiated by about 22,000 votes right now. Let's take a look at the map and see where this leaves us as we look nationally. Again, two different trends of blue, southwest, northeast, red from the Mississippi Valley to the Atlantic seaboard, all the way up through the middle plains. Rachel?
I will just note that while we are not looking at a lot of flips here in terms of the various states on the map, don't sleep on that New Hampshire result. That was a Hillary Clinton state in 2016, but it was a Hillary Clinton state, I believe, by 0.37% of the vote. Trump got very, very close to beating Clinton in New Hampshire in 2016. So to see Biden now the projected winner in New Hampshire, again, that's not a flip, but it is a sigh of relief for Democrats who saw how close Trump was able to get there. Again, one of the states we are watching very, very closely, Nicole Wallace might be watching, you might say intently, is the state of Wisconsin, where it is too early to call at this point. And we are watching closely, particularly alongside Michigan and Pennsylvania, these other crucial states. As you see right now, just over a third of the vote in Wisconsin, very close between them. And we're expecting 3.6 million votes. And we've got about 1.2 million reported thus far, so a long way to go in terms of Wisconsin and the eyes of the nation upon Wisconsin. Once again, our friend Charlie Sykes is in Wisconsin for us tonight, watching these results and helping us make sense of them. Charlie, when you look at what we've seen thus far out of Wisconsin, what do you think?
Well, first of all, everybody take a deep breath. This election is not going to be decided by the SEC. It's going to be decided by the Big Ten. And we haven't gotten all the results here yet. So I'm looking at the Wisconsin numbers, and if there are 3.6 million votes, that is very bad news for Donald Trump, because he won here 4 years ago by getting fewer votes than Mitt Romney got against Barack Obama when he lost by 7 points. And so far, I'm looking at some of the numbers. He's underperforming what he did 4 years ago in crucial Waukesha County. I live in Ozaukee County, which is one of the Milwaukee suburbs. suburbs. He's winning by, Donald Trump is winning by only 8 percentage points. So he is certainly not adding to his margins in crucial Republican areas. And as you look at those numbers, remember this, we won't get the final numbers from heavily Democratic Milwaukee County until 5 a.m. tomorrow. And that is going to be the decisive number. So I think that looking at this right now, looking at the demographics that we're seeing in Ohio, you're seeing some very, very good news in the upper Midwest. I mean, I know that we're disappointed about Florida, but this feels a lot like 2018. Look at what the margins are, how they're shifting. How they're shifting among independents, what's happening in the suburbs. You're seeing that in Ohio. My guess is you're going to see that in Pennsylvania, and you're already seeing that in Wisconsin right now.
Charlie, let me ask you about one other Wisconsin dynamic, which has loomed so large over the past 4 years. I feel like it has overshadowed our ability to think rationally about Wisconsin. And that is that when Trump won in 2016, and as you said, he won by less than a point, he had never led in a single poll in Wisconsin, not a single public poll, not one. And then he went ahead and won the state. Is Wisconsin polling, which shows Biden broadly ahead heading into tonight's results, is Wisconsin polling any better in 2020 than it was in 2016?
Well, I think so. The Marquette University Law Poll, which is considered the gold standard, has Biden up by, I think, 4 or 5 points. It's going to be close. It's going to be single digits. But I think that they have adjusted to the mistakes they made 4 years ago. But the key thing in Wisconsin right now is the question of, will voters in, say, Milwaukee County, will African-American voters turn out in Wisconsin? Because famously 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton got 40,000 fewer votes than Barack Obama got just in Milwaukee County. If she had matched Barack Obama's total in Milwaukee County, she would have won the state because Trump won by only about 23,000 votes. Now, the other big variable is whether there's a big hidden rural, non-college educated white vote coming from northern and western women. And I'm not seeing any indications of that. Trump seems to be holding his own outstate. But the question is, will Democrats turn out? The indication that I have is there's big numbers out of Madison, which is Dane County, and big numbers out of Milwaukee. And keep in mind that Wisconsin has been hammered by the coronavirus as much as any state in the country. And every single time that Donald Trump has come here for one of his rallies, he's reminded people of his failure on that issue. So the story of Wisconsin is very heavily shadowed by what's happening with COVID-19.
Charlie, my colleagues here in the studio are eager to ask you more Wisconsin questions. I'm going to hold them back for a second because I think we've got a quick call we've got to do before we rejoin this discussion.
We do. This is not a flip or a surprise, but we have awarded the state of Utah and its 6 electoral votes to the Trump column. We'll convert over to the national colorized map and see that this extends past Colorado now, the block of red that starts in the middle of the country. Rachel, back to you.
It's interesting. In Utah in 2016, of course, we had that unusual dynamic with Evan McMullen taking 20+% of the vote in Utah, which made it such an unusual state. But Trump did win that in 2016. Joy, you wanted to ask Charlie something on Wisconsin.
I did. Well, in terms of a lot of the angst and anxiety that people are feeling about the result tonight. And I think a lot of it was skewed by Florida. I think you're absolutely right. It feels like 2018 again. But zero back in again for me on African-American turnout, because that was indeed the difference for, why Hillary Clinton didn't do as well there as she could have and lost the state. What is that looking like? What is the state of any sort of disenfranchisement activity? We know that is a thing that happens a lot in Wisconsin. How open, how accessible has the vote been, and how much turnout have you seen?
Well, we won't know until we get the final results tomorrow morning. But I'm not hearing a lot of complaints about it right now, mainly because Democrats really over the last 4 years have really gotten their act together again. Remember that Supreme Court election that we had during the coronavirus, where people had to stand in line during the height of it? And there was a rather surprising result in that election. And I think that's the model that's been used here. So, you know, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Republicans absolutely dominated the get out the vote efforts and the early vote efforts here in Wisconsin. I mean, I remember that very well. I think that script has been flipped here. But again, the numbers you're seeing out of Wisconsin do not represent all of Milwaukee County. And frankly, that's going to be where the African-American vote is concentrated, Milwaukee County, Racine County, and Kenosha County. And I would be very surprised if you did not see a substantial increase from 4 years ago. And if Donald Trump cannot add to his margins outstate, and if he is losing votes in the crucial Milwaukee suburbs, places like Waukesha County, then I think it's going to be very difficult for him to win the state of Wisconsin.
Charlie, because it's Donald Trump, we know where he's ailing politically because he cries out to them and he cries out to suburban women exactly in the parts of the state that you're talking about. Have you seen anything come in Ohio or anywhere else that signals to you the kind of result in some of those counties?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, also in North Carolina. Now, whether or not Joe Biden wins in Ohio or North Carolina, I think that if you see the same kinds of trends there where Trump's margins have been cut, if you see that in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, you know what the results are going to be. I mean, the margins in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin are like this, right? So if, in fact, look, if you're looking at Ohio, Trump won by 8 points last time. He may win by 1 point this time. If you see that kind of shift in those demographic groups in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Donald Trump is going to be in a lot of trouble. It's because the reality is that here in Wisconsin, we're not that much different than Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan demographically.
Well, I guess that's what everyone's worried about, right? If you see Ohio go in one direction. But I guess one other question I have is the kind of Republicans, like the Paul Ryan Republican, are the kind of Republicans that can hold their own in a Wisconsin nice kind of state. I mean, just talk about, I mean, Wisconsin can land differently. That Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania slice of it is terrain that the Trump campaign saw as slightly more hostile to the Trump trajectory. The Trump 2020 persona is not as winning in their own view as Trump 2016.
Well, think about it, that Wisconsin has one of the highest proportions of non-college educated white voters. So on paper, this ought to be one of the most Trump-friendly states, one of the most difficult states to flip around. So Donald Trump had to do a lot of work to alienate a state like Wisconsin, which I think he's done. And so, yes, you do have the Paul Ryan Republicans, but they're basically an extinct species. They're not here anymore. And the Republican Party here is, to be quite honest, is all in for Donald Trump. But like in a lot of other states that we've been talking about, because they've become so Trumpy, I think that they have been more repulsive and repellent to some of these key swing voters in the suburban areas that are going to make a difference here when we get the final results.
Charlie, I have one last question, and we framed all this around Trump because we've watched the Trump result come in Florida, but I want to turn it around on to the Joe Biden side. I mean, the Biden campaign is somewhat disadvantaged by the fact that the states where they felt the most bullish, where they felt the most confident that a Joe Biden Democrat would appeal in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, it's going to take longer. You're talking about 5 a.m. before some of that question will be answerable. Can you talk about how it felt for Biden? I mean, do you have anecdotal sort of yard sign data or any sort of polling from the grocery store line or the Applebee's to share?
Well, I do think that you see this kind of shift here. I mean, there's a county just to the north of us where I think Donald Trump is winning by 40 points. The county that I'm in right now is only winning by 8 points. You get a little bit to the south, and Joe Biden is winning overwhelmingly. He's alienated so many of the suburban votes. But again, let's just remind ourselves that we knew this was going to happen. right? We knew in 2018 that the earliest returns that we got from Florida and Georgia would not necessarily be an indicator of what was going to happen nationally. We knew that there were going to be states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin that were going to be slow in reporting. So I hope that everybody just takes a deep breath and remembers it's the Big Ten, not the SEC, that's going to determine the outcome of this election.
Charlie Sykes.
Wonderful reminder.
Well put. Thank you very much, my friend. Listen, what's going on tonight thus far is actually fairly easy to summarize. The Democrats picked up one Republican Senate seat. The Republicans picked up one Democratic Senate seat. So far is a wash in terms of control of the United States Senate. Nobody has claimed a seat. Nobody has claimed a state from the other party compared to results from 2016, although there are three of them that we're watching closely. North Carolina, where it's too close, Arizona, where it's too early, but Biden has a lead, and Pennsylvania, where it's too early. We're going to be checking in on those after this. NBC has now projected that in the great state of Missouri, President Donald Trump will once again be the winner in Missouri. Again, that is not a pickup for the Republicans. Missouri has been deep red and in the Republican column for some time now, but that Missouri call is now official in terms of NBC News' projection. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, again, we'll be looking at North Carolina right now, too close to call. Arizona, too early to call, but Biden characterized as being in the lead. Pennsylvania, too early to call, with not much in the way of clear expectations in terms of when we're going to know. Lots still to come tonight. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We are back. You'll note Missouri snuck in there before the break. Illinois has spoken. Neither of these are pickups. They're holds. This is Joe Biden, the projected winner of Illinois, and it's 20 electoral votes. And Senator Dick Durbin is going to remain in the U.S. Senate as well from the state of Illinois. So two holds for the Democrats. And to Steve Kornacki, can you bring us up to speed on North Carolina and Arizona, please?
Let's take a look here, a couple different places. So again, in North Carolina now, the Trump advantage has moved up over 50,000 votes. What has he gained to put him there? We were talking about this Union County here, big suburban, exurban county outside of Charlotte, and basically the vote is in there now. Trump's going to end up over 60%. Again, getting big same-day numbers. We saw that number lagging earlier overall for Trump, his percentage in this county. He ends up over 60%, gets a lot of votes out of there. And so you see statewide, that helps him move up. Now you see close to 60,000 votes statewide. Where is the remaining vote in North Carolina? Still a lot in Wake County, where Raleigh is, Greensboro, Winston-Salem. There's still some to come in Charlotte. There are still a small amount scattering in our smaller Republican-friendly areas of the state as well. All told, what you're looking at here is just over 400,000 votes statewide remain to be counted here. 82,000 of them are in Wake County. You can see another 50,000 of them are in Guilford County, where Greensboro is. So there are opportunities here for Biden to cut into it. But again, I think the other thing that comes into play here is just the possibility there will be other ballots that come in the mail in North Carolina after Election Day, trying to figure out how many that might be, what that could do to the margin here. So let's see where the margin ends up after these votes all get tabulated. Then that becomes the question in North Carolina. But Trump's lead right now sitting at 60,000 votes. We take a trip out to Arizona. Again, not much changing here. You see just getting sort of that big initial batch of the vote. We're basically going to be sitting here looking at 3/4 of the vote in Arizona. Then the numbers are going to change. We'll be watching here in the next few hours to see the numbers change in Maricopa County as they count up the same-day vote in Maricopa County. How much ground can Donald Trump make up? He's certainly running from behind based on that initial batch that we got here. Let's see what happens there as those votes are counted. So far, nothing new there since we got that gigantic initial batch. One other that is suddenly becoming potentially significant on this map, and I want to flag this for you. It's not a state. It's part of a state. It is the 2nd congressional district of Nebraska, and this is Omaha, the Omaha area. And here's the vote right now in the 2nd district. The reason I'm showing you this is because Nebraska and Maine give out their electoral votes by congressional district. So the winner of this congressional district that I'm showing you right now, think of it as the smallest state in the union for tonight, at least, because it's worth one electoral vote. Whoever wins this, Trump got this electoral vote in 2016. You see with the vote that's in right now, he's clinging to a 600-vote lead. We're just going and we're looking. So far, what's counted in here is the same-day vote up until 2 p.m. this afternoon. Okay, so there's more same-day vote, the vote that was basically cast this afternoon and evening, and there's still early vote that's also being added here. Keep a very close eye on this because the electoral college implications are this. Let me paint what right now, if you're at a Biden campaign, you're saying, boy, this is the worst-case scenario for us. That would involve, hey, you lose Florida, you lose Georgia, you lose Texas, you lose North Carolina, you lose Ohio, and then you lose Pennsylvania. This is your worst-case scenario. If all of that went wrong for Biden, the path they could still take that would get them to 270 would involve Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, which we just talked about. Those three would get him to 269. And the second congressional district of Nebraska, if they could get it, would be 270. So to keep that in mind, because these electoral college scenarios, we've been playing around with so many of them the last few months. And as Donald Trump early on has some success in these big states we flagged at the beginning of the night, this is one folks have talked about. Is there a scenario there? 269 comes into focus. We've always talked about what would happen then. Or is Biden able to actually get that district? And that presents a path for him that wouldn't require him to win Pennsylvania.
That is crazy. I mean, I have done that math myself, and I know it's true, but I can't believe we're talking about it as one of the things that might actually happen. Steve, before we get too far away from Arizona, can I ask you to look at Senate in Arizona again just for a second? Again, NBC News is characterizing in Arizona both the presidential race and the Senate race as too close to call, as too early to call. But in both cases, Joe Biden in the presidential race and Mark Kelly, the Democrat in the Senate race, are characterized as in the lead. Can we look at what that means in terms of the Kelly-McSally Senate race in Arizona?
Yeah, here you go. Oh, I think we got something.
Excuse the interruption. Nebraska, part of the split electoral vote, Nebraska, as projected, is being projected to Donald Trump. And we've explained this before. The split congressional district, this is the western part, the part that has not been striped on our map. Rachel, please, back to your
Sure. It's a very timely call, actually, given what Steve was just explaining about that second congressional district and that one electoral vote in Nebraska. Okay, Arizona Senate, Mark Kelly versus Martha McSally.
Yeah, so again, let's start on the presidential race here in Arizona, where you see Biden right now almost 9 points ahead. And where does the Senate race? There you go. Kelly, double digits ahead. We're looking at the same collection of votes right here. Mm-hmm. This one, we were talking in North Carolina about how Cal Cunningham, the Democrat, had been running better than Joe Biden, I should say, in some of the early polling, but not tonight. This is the opposite. This is what we saw in the polling. We saw Mark Kelly consistently running better than Joe Biden, stronger than Joe Biden in Arizona. You're seeing this in the returns here, double digits for Kelly. And again, if you look at the presidential race and what's been reported so far, about 1.5 points, 2 points difference there. So again, Biden leading, Kelly leading by even more. When Democrats talked optimistically about the Senate race in Arizona, it's because they thought, on top of other things, they thought they might have a little bit of a pad right there on top of the presidential race.
This Arizona race turning out to be fascinating in lots of different ways. Let's bring into the conversation now Lori Roberts, who is a columnist with the Arizona Republic. She's in Phoenix tonight. Ms. Roberts, thank you so much for making time. Arizona's turning out to be a really interesting place to watch tonight. How are you viewing it? What should we know from a national perspective that we might not be able to see from this far out?
Well, I think if you're Martha McSally, you're breaking out the hard liquor about right now. Mm-hmm. She needed to keep it close in the early vote, which is what you're seeing right now. Arizona is a big early vote state, so roughly 75% of the vote is going to be early vote, and that was going to skew a little bit Democratic. But boy, a 10, 11-point lead, that's a tough one to make up with only 25% of the vote left to go. So I think if you're Martha McSally, you are not real happy tonight. You look at Maricopa County in particular, that is the place that matters the most because we have 60% of the vote. That's the Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, Glendale area. It's breaking big for Joe Biden and for Mark Kelly.
In terms of the Biden race and the Kelly race, and those existing in parallel, and we are seeing sort of parallel characterizations right now by NBC, do you see any cross currents between those two? Do you think that Kelly may have helped Biden there, or Biden may have helped Kelly? Conversely, do you think that McSally or Trump might have hurt one another's campaigns, as they both seem to be trailing right now?
Well, McSally always seemed to run in the polling about 4 to 5 to 6%, depending on which poll you looked at, behind Donald Trump. So that tells me that a lot of Republicans, in particular very conservative Republicans, were not so sure about Martha McSally. Conversely, a lot of very moderate Republicans and independents, in particular women in the suburbs, which you're hearing about all over the country, were turned off by Donald Trump and by Martha McSally, who really has been portrayed as being in Donald Trump's pocket for the last 2 years. Her fate was tied to Donald Trump's. I'm not sure that Donald Trump's fate was necessarily tied to hers, but what we're seeing is that both appear to be going down tonight.
We've had a lot of questions, and this is Joy, about the Hispanic vote or the Latino vote around the country. And I think Florida tells one particular story, and I feel like Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona tell a different story. Can you talk about that vote, which is a sort of largely Mexican-American based Latinx vote, and where is that going, and how strong is the turnout?
It has been extremely strong, and where it was strong is in early balloting. Latino women, Latino men, Latino voters, Democratic voters, they came out in huge numbers. Republicans have always had a 6 to 7% point advantage going into Election Day. This year, it was more like a 1-point advantage. And the polling today, I mean, not the polling, but the people that you saw out at the polls, huge numbers of people. And I think the story of this election might, in the end, be the independents who came out big today. And we were expecting them to break for Democrats, and it appears that they did.
Lori, that is the analysis that I've heard from former McCain advisors, and McCain always counted on those independents coming out for him. Can you talk about how Trump might have hurt himself with what is people in the state know how important independents are to their vote, but either someone forgot to tell Donald Trump or he didn't care, but it seems like 4 years of attacks against the McCain family may have hurt him with that block of independents.
Well, I think it's not just that, but it is. I don't think that Donald Trump and Martha McSally ever tried to expand their base. Remember that 8 years ago, this is a state that went by 8 points for Mitt Romney. This is a state that 4 years ago went by 3 points for Donald Trump. And so you could see the numbers changing. He just never tried to broaden his appeal to women. In fact, what did he say when he was in Arizona last week? What did he call rhinos? The worst human beings ever? Something like that. That's not a direct quote, but it was something like that. It's offensive and it's off-putting. But I think that he lost, if he loses this election, which it appears, at least in Arizona, that he's going to, it's because they never brought along those women who maybe voted for Donald Trump 4 years ago, but have been turned off in the last 4 years. And you saw it 2 years ago with the election of Martha McSally, or with the defeat of Martha McSally, where you saw moderate Republican and independent women going for our Republican governor and for Democrat Kyrsten Sinema. You cannot underestimate how important this is. We don't elect Democrats here. We just don't. And so things are changing in a big way, and they just did not see it coming.
Lori Roberts, columnist with the Arizona Republic, joining us tonight from Phoenix, where, again, NBC has still characterized this race as too early to call, but with Democrats in the lead both in the Senate and presidential races. Lori, thank you so much. Fascinating night tonight in Arizona, and a lot of fascinating politics, I think, to come in Arizona. I'm going to interrupt myself right now because I believe Brian has some calls.
We have some calls. None of them flips Mississippi. The projected winner is Donald Trump. That's a hold. Wyoming, the projected winner is Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham is headed back to the U.S. Senate after we take a look at the road to 270. Lindsey Graham is headed back to the U.S. Senate from South Carolina. Jamie Harrison, despite a flood of outside money, especially at the end of this thing, could not do it, could not convert it in the state of South Carolina. The Georgia second race will be indeed a runoff between Warnock and Loeffler. That we have just been able to put in the runoff category. It's a lot to balance, but Rachel, this is what we do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a lot. It does mean that we are going to have a potentially determinative Senate runoff in Georgia in January. As we get to the top of the hour here, I do want to just say a moment before we put that South Carolina Senate race behind us, how much I think the Democratic Party and South Carolina has to be proud of in Jamie Harrison, former Democratic Party chairman, a protege of Jim Clyburn, who's the dean of the South Carolina delegation, running in a blood red state, raising a ton of money, running a dignified, inspiring, in some ways flawless campaign, and it was not enough to get him to beat Lindsey Graham, who is contending with his own reputational issues. But Jamie Harrison, I think, is a big part of the future of the Democratic Party in the South.
And can I just say that, you know, sometimes I think when we look at political races, we only look at the win and loss, but there's also party building that happens when somebody runs a really good election. And I think you have to look at the party building that's happened in these southern states, including Texas, where Beto O'Rourke gets a lot of credit for what he's built. And Jamie, who is an expert politician, he's very good at what he does, and he has built that state party is now a lot stronger because of Jamie Harrison, and they'll be able to build on that for other races, and that's really important. And he might have legs for other down ticket races. There's not just that top of the ticket. There's a lot going on down ticket.
You use the word dignified. I mean, he made the opposite true. Lindsey Graham became even more undignified, as if that were possible, begging for money on Fox News.
Unbelievable.
We are coming up onto the top of the hour. We are at the point where there's not many poll closings left, but there are a few, particularly as we get to the West Coast, and there are a number of states left to call.
And boy, does some of the numbers start to add up as we get late in the night, however frustrating this night is for many, many of our viewers. Coming up here on 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and here we go. The state of California awards 55 electoral votes, as is our projection. Not a surprise to Joe Biden. Oregon, 7 electoral votes to Joe Biden. Washington, 12 electoral votes to Joe Biden. Idaho, too early to call. We have determined Trump leads. Here's the graphic to 270. It's 192, 114 at this hour. 270 is where you start the conversation. Here's backfilling some of the races we're watching. This is Florida. Too close to call, and we have determined this to be too close to call, though Trump leads. North Carolina, too close to call. Texas, too early to call, Trump leads. Pennsylvania, too early to call. Ohio, too early to call, Trump leads. Michigan, too early to call, period. Georgia, too early to call. Arizona, too early to call, Biden leads. Wisconsin, too early to call. Minnesota, too early to call. Iowa, too early to call. Nevada, too early to call. What are the odds? Let's look at the map. We've been watching the color-coded states get awarded all night. To think that 6 o'clock Eastern time. 5 hours ago when we started this, it was a blank gray slate. Low they have filled in. Low there's a lot of math to go. Steve Kornacki, what interests you that's been popping up on your map in the time it took me to read that?
Quite a bit, Brian. Let's focus here. How about Pennsylvania? Because
Sure.
we've talked about, look, this is going to take some time because of some of the counties taking a while with the mail-in ballots. But there are some counties in Pennsylvania that have counted everything and given us a complete look. And I do think this is worth keeping in mind as Pennsylvania perhaps looms larger and larger in the hours ahead. One of the reasons Donald Trump was able to flip Pennsylvania in 2016 was he ran up extraordinary margins in rural parts of the state, in western Pennsylvania, places Republicans had usually done well, but he did incredibly well in these places. And one of the questions was, would he be doing that again tonight? We are getting some full returns here. We've got just about all three. Here's a county we got just about everything in. Trump's running at 72-27. He's actually exceeding right now his 2016 number. This is small, but again, we've talked about this in places like Georgia tonight. Small counties with enormous margins do add up. Next door, here's a place where Trump hit 73% in 2016. Tiny, but he's hitting 73% tonight. I'm seeing this in all sorts of small counties in western Pennsylvania. That seems to be where we are getting most of the full reports out of Pennsylvania so far. Trump is in those small rural counties hitting, in some cases exceeding that 2016 number. That is only part of the story in Pennsylvania. I flag it because we're getting the full results from those counties. We are not getting the full results from places like Pittsburgh, from places like Philadelphia, from places like the Philadelphia suburbs that are key to Democratic hopes, especially in Philadelphia. That's where you're going to have a lot of lag, I think, with the mail-in voting. But I do think that's a piece of it to keep an eye on in Pennsylvania, because we've been seeing that in some other states tonight. And if the electoral college battle does come down to Pennsylvania, worth keeping that in mind. Every time we can get one of these counties up to 100%, we're going to measure it up against 2016 and tell you if we're seeing strength or weakness for one candidate.
In terms of Pennsylvania right now, we've been talking all night about how these three states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, are, as Nicole, as you've been putting it, they're sort of the whole story in terms of what the Biden campaign was aiming at. What does happen if those are the states on which this is all going to hinge and we don't have answers about any of them tonight? I mean, psychologically, what happens and what does that do to the momentum and the...
It becomes Bill Barr as the president's lawyer at the Justice Department representing the president. He's made clear that whether it's a libel case or whether it's a ballot issue, he views Bill Barr as his personal lawyer. He's slid seamlessly into that role that Michael Cohen used to fill, versus the gentleman you had on your show last night, Mr. Bauer. And I think that we shouldn't get ahead of the story. But we have, the state officials have prepared their constituents, and I think the Biden campaign has prepared their supporters for a scenario where this doesn't end tonight. You have to think that if both campaigns were seeing the same things in their tracking polls, if both campaigns were talking about these three states, that there's not a ton of surprise inside the Biden campaign that it may come down to these three. You also have to look at the fundraising endeavors that both the Trump side and the Biden campaign have been involved in as of late. They were about a post-election day legal effort. Right. So both campaigns saw this the same way. And I think I have a hard time not seeing this the way a staffer does. And the way a staffer sees it is they look for the intersections. What do both campaigns see? Both campaigns saw these three states as being an endgame, and both campaigns saw Joe Biden as having an edge in the polls, a small edge in these three states. So what does that mean? That means Donald Trump saw his path as likely involving a legal challenge to ballots in PA, and that's where he's been focusing his efforts.
But it's also possible, and I think that, the people who are feeling incredible anxiety, I think one source of anxiety is that with all that's happened, COVID, nearly 250,000 people dead, the racism, the cuddling Nazis, I think for a lot of people, the catharsis of a repudiation by the voters broadly was something that they needed to know that America fundamentally rejects this man. That is not what we're getting tonight. What we're getting is that people are going to stick to their party lines for the most part. There's some conversion. But as you've said, and I think you've said it from a win is a win. If Biden wins gets 270,
270, he's out.
Yeah, he wins, and that's it. And it doesn't matter. And then we'll have to figure out what happens after that. But there is also, people have to realize the possibility that the votes just get counted. It takes until tomorrow, and tomorrow at noon, Pennsylvania just reports its totals, Wisconsin reports its totals, and Michigan reports its totals, and it's totally mundane. Then there's nothing to go to court over because it's clear, right? These states are not controlled by Republicans. I would right now feel the same anxiety as everyone in my two phones if these 3 states were controlled by Republicans. And I hate to say that, but that's where we are. But they're not. They are not controlled by Republicans.
And Trump's not ahead in any of these states
exactly.
either. So
and he can't do anything.
Right.
These governors of these 3 states and the secretaries of state in, the state that used to scare me the most was Wisconsin. Mr. La Follette, the person who's that is not going to allow Donald Trump to just walk in there and do what Scott Walker and his friends would have done. It's not the same Wisconsin. It's not the same Pennsylvania. The governor there is not going to allow it. It could be that we just have to breathe for a night, and tomorrow we'll get the results. And I think everything will.
Can I tell you what I have in my notes? Because all I've been doing is cramming for the last year, getting ready for tonight. My notes on each of these three states. Wisconsin, State Elections Commission chief says Wisconsin will probably not report unofficial results until Wednesday at the earliest. Pennsylvania, governor releases TV ad warning residents that will take, quote, a few days for the vote to be completed. Secretary of State says there is no way Pennsylvania is announcing a winner on election night. Michigan, Secretary of State says the count will likely take until Friday.
Yeah.
So that's Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, which is what we are looking at now. Heidi Przybyla is in Michigan, is in Detroit, specifically with a look at what we can expect in terms of the Michigan vote. Heidi, it's great to have you with us tonight. What are you hearing in Michigan?
Yeah, Rachel, I think that was Joy who said, just breathe. And I can tell you, after being on the phone with Michigan officials all night, they really endorse that sentiment. They're looking at these numbers that are coming in, and they say, this is truly an overrepresentation of the in-person vote here in Michigan. They couldn't even start tabulating a lot of these early absentee votes until this morning. And because of the crazy patchwork here of reporting, some of the precincts aren't even sending in their AV, their absentee votes yet. So you're getting a very skewed representation. Let me give you an example. Macomb County, Trump won there by 10 points in 2016. We're starting to get the early numbers. He's got a wide lead again. But you peel that up a little bit, and you see that there are already some precincts where we do have a fuller account of the vote, and we've seen our first red to blue shift in center line, where Joe Biden is outperforming what Hillary Clinton did. So again, they're saying breathe. They are still optimistic that in the end, Joe Biden will take the state, and they say that what you should look at right now, instead of this patchwork, is the surge pattern in voting, because Michigan was the place where Donald Trump had his smallest margin of victory. And so they say, and this is according to the Secretary of State who briefed us, that the places where we're seeing the surges are, number 1, Detroit. We're not seeing a surge like we saw in 2012, but we're seeing it above 2016. We know Detroit is reliably blue in that surrounding area. Okay, 2 other places, Kalamazoo and Ann Arbor. What do they have in common? College areas. Michigan changed their rules to allow same-day in-person voting, registration and voting, and we're seeing long lines in those areas. So if you look at the surge patterns and where the surge patterns are, Michigan officials are still optimistic, but they are cautioning no reading into any of these numbers until we have them all in. And the most recent news from the Secretary of State is that we won't have even unofficial results for 24 hours, Rachel.
24 hours from now, they're not expecting any unofficial results until Wednesday after 11 p.m.?
That's what she said.
Wow.
I mean, if you're looking at a Friday final, right, like for unofficial, that would not be unreasonable, considering that some of these places, like in Macomb County, haven't even registered their early votes.
Wow. Heidi Przybyla for us in Michigan tonight, in Detroit. Thank you so much. And that is a really good reset and reminder. Again, we've been talking about it. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to grok it. It's another thing to actually grasp it and prepare yourselves. All right. While we were talking about the upper Midwest, we've talked a long time about Wisconsin moments ago. We're going to hop over Wisconsin, go from Michigan over Wisconsin to talk about Iowa and Minnesota, a couple of states that we haven't had a ton of focus on yet, but are crucial at this point, both of which we're watching results closely. Steve, Iowa and Minnesota, your choice as to which you look at first.
Yeah, let's take a look here. Let's call up Iowa because you do have some numbers coming in. There is Iowa. So right now, Biden in what's been counted in Iowa, about 1 million votes with a 6-point advantage here. Again, we can call up here and see still about 800,000 or so ballots to be counted in Iowa. Now, I think the cautionary note on this is take a look at some of these counties where Biden's doing very well right now, sort of along the Mississippi River here. Let's see if we can call that up. What you're looking at here is early absentee vote. And remember, you're always talking about Joe Biden doing much better with the early vote than the same-day vote. So the target here, this was a Trump county. Biden would certainly like to flip it. That would represent progress for him in the state. But the test for Biden is yet to come in a county like this. The test is going to be the same-day vote, where Trump is expected to do better. I think you've heard this story a number of times in a number of different states tonight. So let's see, a place like Clinton County, this is a prime example. What happens when the same day is counted? Does it turn into another Trump victory and it looks like 2016 all over again? Or does it represent Biden progress when all is said and done? Clinton County is a very good example because I remind you, in 2012, the Mississippi River, including Clinton County, was Obama country. And then it flipped along with the rest of the state. This is 2016. In Iowa, there were more counties in Iowa than any other state between 2012 and 2016 that flipped from Democrat to Republican. So Democrats have looked at this. Look, on paper, Iowa was a 9-point win for Donald Trump in 2016. It was also a 6-point win for Barack Obama in 2012. That's the opportunity Democrats have seen here. You see good numbers for Democrats in some of these places. I think here's a good example where most of the votes in Polk County, Des Moines state capital, Democratic territory. Biden winning this thing 56.5 to 41. It's different than 2016. It lands, but, 52 for Clinton, 56 for Biden, 56 and change for Biden. Remember, statewide, this was a 9-point victory for Donald Trump in 2016. The improvement here for Democrats is they go from an 11-point victory in this county in 2016 to 15, basically 15.4. That's progress. But they need a lot of progress here to take Iowa. So, again, you got some counties like Polk. That's a good example where you got a lot of the vote in. But in a lot of places in Iowa right now, you're seeing Biden lead in the statewide count because you're seeing a lot of that early vote that's coming in. And there is that question of the same day and how much it changed it. It has certainly changed some other states tonight.
Steve, before you go on and talk about Minnesota, can we talk about the Iowa Senate race as well? Again, this is another state where we've got a key Senate race. In this case, it's a race that Democrats see potentially as a pickup alongside that hard-fought presidential race. And again, in the Senate race in Iowa, of course, the incumbent Republican is Joni Ernst. The Democrat, Teresa Greenfield, has run a well-funded, very solid campaign against Ernst, but Ernst has done pretty well in recent polls.
Well, you could take a look here. Let's see here. Joe Biden leading in the presidential race, 51-46, and let's flip it around and show you the Senate race. Look at that. Greenfield leading in our count right now, 50.7, 46.5. This is like an eye test. I'm looking for the changes here so I can show you some of these. Let's take a look. I saw a good old Webster County change. You can see Greenfield up by 2 in the Senate race. This was a Trump county in 2016, obviously. And if you flip over to the presidential race, you see Donald Trump. It's not a huge shift there, but that's a shift of a few points. Iowa's a state. It's a state that could go for Obama by 6 and could go for Trump by 9. Yeah, it's a state that had gone Democratic in a lot of elections before Donald Trump. Interesting, though, to be seeing right now, at least, a split between those two races.
Yeah, that's fascinating and very close. I mean, Iowa, Gore won it by less than 1%, right? George W. Bush won it by less than 1% in 2004. Obama then won it by a lot, both in 2008 and 2012. Then Trump won it by a lot. I mean, the idea that you'd end up with a hotly contested presidential race there is not far-fetched, but it'll be very interesting to see if that Senate race drags the presidential race one way or the other, and also to see whether Joni Ernst gets turfed out of her seat. Teresa Greenfield's a strong candidate, but that's a fascinating race. Okay, Steve, can we talk Minnesota, or am I asking too much?
Let's call it up here. Let me just get this screen loaded, and let's go north to Minnesota.
In terms of Minnesota, I mean, just for context, Clinton only won Minnesota in 2016. Again, it was a Clinton-held state. It was a blue state in 2016, but by like 1.5%. It was close, just like New Hampshire was.
Minnesota's the upper Midwest state that got away for Donald Trump in 2016. You know, he was able to flip Michigan. He was able to flip Wisconsin, able to flip Iowa. And then this was almost a flip. Yeah, Minnesota, the last time it went for a Republican presidential candidate was actually 1972. It's been going Democratic every election since then, but Trump nearly pulled this off in 2016. And I'll just take you through here some of the early votes here. Look, you got early. This is Hennepin County. This is core Democratic, you know, Twin Cities metro area here. Let's just see what is left. About 45,000 votes to go. And Biden here overperforming what Clinton got in 2016. Minnesota is a state. It really has become politically a tale of two states. In places like the Twin Cities area, in places like Hennepin County, it's just been dramatically moving toward the Democrats. Democrats flipped 2 congressional seats in this Twin Cities area in 2018. But Minnesota was also the only state in 2018 where Republicans were flipping Democratic House seats because the rural areas, southern Minnesota, the Iron Range, sort of this rural kind of ring that goes around the outer edges of the state. Incredible strides for Republicans there that Trump really drove up in 2016. So Trump was running up the score in these parts of the state, while Clinton, and certainly tonight you're seeing Biden running up the score in the Twin Cities. There's just two forces moving in opposite directions in Minnesota, and you can see there that's why Trump sees a chance in the state, because blue-collar white population, large blue-collar white population in those areas I'm talking about.
Now, Minnesota, I don't know much about the way that Minnesota is counting their vote this year, in part because a bunch of roundups that I read about it and a bunch of people that I talked to about it said, oh, yeah, they're going to be fine, but we don't exactly know how it's going to come in. Is Minnesota one of those states where we do have any sort of indication that they'll get more likely Trump vote day of voters versus or less of those voters in terms of the initial vote tally?
Yeah, and you're getting a mix here, too. This is a lot like Wisconsin. So here you go. Here's a good example. We're getting up basically close to 100%. Trump, you know, this looks very similar to 2016 here. You know, so you're going to get a mix here, I think, in Minnesota. You're going to get a mix like in Wisconsin. You know, we're talking about in Michigan seeing a lot of these, the same-day vote is really taking sort of preeminence right now. Same thing in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania and Michigan, we're looking at a lot of same-day vote coming out first. You're seeing a lot of early vote in Iowa. That's getting Biden that lead right now. Minnesota, Wisconsin, I think you're seeing a bit of a mix. So we've got, you know, sort of different buckets that are accounting for what you're seeing in different states right now.
Steve, I'm going to be a total jerk and just keep going with this. Do you have anything on the Minnesota Senate race? Minnesota Senate race, I think, has been a real sleeper. This is the Democratic incumbent Tina Smith against a Republican challenger named Jason Lewis. And even though it has not had a lot of national attention, the polling has actually been quite close there. And it made me wonder if Trump has an unexpectedly good showing in Minnesota, whether Tina Smith might potentially be in trouble.
And the trend in the votes that have been reported so far has Tina Smith 53-39. In the votes that have been counted, she's up 14. In the votes that have been counted, there's Biden up by 16.5. So you're seeing a 2.5-point lag there. This is a case where the Senate candidate, the Democratic Senate candidate, is lagging behind Joe Biden by 2.5 points in the margin. And yes, you're right. Again, the presidential race margin in Minnesota in 2016 was 1.5 points. We'll see where this one ends up tonight. But if you were to end up in a situation that was similarly close and the Democratic Senate candidate were running 2.5 points behind, that would be trouble. We got a ways to go here. As you saw, Biden did in Hennepin County. It does look like he's going to overperform there. So Democrats might be making gains. But again, are those gains going to be balanced out in the rural areas where Trump is doing very well in Minnesota and elsewhere tonight?
Yeah, I think sleeper thing to watch there, absolutely, in terms of potential interest and potential national impact. Let's bring into the conversation our friend Chris Hayes. Chris, as we have seen these 5.5 hours unfold since we've seen poll closings tonight, we've seen a lot stay the same from 2016, some tweaks around the edges, but I feel like we are seeing a lot of continuity, both in terms of what's blue and what's red on the map, but also the numbers.
It's striking. I mean, I think it's been striking, obviously, from 2016 when the president won the Electoral College, even losing by 3 million votes, that it was an incredibly polarized and divided nation politically. And the thing that I've been obsessed with throughout is the president's approval rating. It has been remarkably stable. It's been the most stable approval rating in modern history, and we have approval rating data going back a long time. Gallup has been polling on it forever. You will see that over the course of the last year, which has been the most sort of tempestuous, monumental, and tragic in many ways year of any of our lives, he has basically stayed the same. And going into today, the number that I kept thinking about was that the two big first-term losses of incumbents who served full terms, Jimmy Carter and, of course, George H.W. Bush, Donald Trump was above them, but he was also below in approval rating George W. Bush, as well as Bill Clinton, and as well as Barack Obama, which is to say he was in a sort of historical no man's land in between clear incumbent losers and clear incumbent winners. And what we're seeing, I think, tonight bears that out. I mean, this is a remarkably stable base of support the president has had. We're seeing it tonight. He barely eked it out with an inside straight 4 years ago, and we are looking to see what happens here now. But it is striking to imagine what has happened in the last 4 years, particularly in the last year, and see how structurally embedded so much of American politics is.
Chris, what does that say to you in terms of the rest of the Republican Party and Donald Trump? I think that people have very easily sort of fallen into this idea that there was the Republican Party until Trump, and now there's Trumpism, and we don't really know what the Republican Party is outside of that. If he has an appeal, whatever you make of it, that is unchanged by all external events, what does that do for other candidates in his party having to decide whether they're going to ally with him or not on individual policy issues or individual crises that won't affect the way that viewers view him at all?
You know, it's a great question. I think one of the things we've seen in the era of Trump, and I think we're seeing it in some senses tonight compared to 2018, is that no one else can quite pull off what he does. Whatever he is doing politically, the hold that he has on voters politically is different than other members of the Republican Party. But what we have seen, and what's happening here tonight, and it jumps off the map in a lot of places that Steve Kornacki's talking about and looking to, is something we have seen across the democratized West, and that is education polarization. We are seeing places that had been not non-college areas, places with lower degrees of lower percentages of 4-degree attainment, breaking towards parties of the right, and those who are in the sort of professional classes, those with 4-year and postgraduate degrees, breaking towards the left. That's happened in places like the UK. It's happened in places like France. It is happening in the US. That driving factor has been driving a kind of realignment of the two coalitions, and we are just seeing it everywhere we look on the map tonight. When you look at the suburbs of Columbus versus Mahoning County in Ohio, which went to Donald Trump, you are seeing that jump out. When you look at the Rio Grande Valley versus Harris County, you are watching that kind of reassembling of these coalitions, those forces which are bigger than the U.S., pulling on the American electorate, and Trump is a kind of vessel for that as much as anything else.
Chris Hayes, excellent and fascinating, as always. Thank you, my friend. We will be back with you. We're going to take a quick break now, and then we're going to come back. When we come back on the other side of this break, we're going to be talking about some new data that we've just got in Pennsylvania. Again, Pennsylvania, potentially all important tonight. And the data coming in county by county in Pennsylvania is wildly different from county to county in terms of which part of the vote is coming in first, when counties plan to report the rest of the vote. As we watch this, it is helter-skelter in the Keystone State. That's next.
Coming up on 11:30 here in the East, and here is all that we do not know with any certainty. Our call on Arizona is too early to call. Biden leads. Then we go to the Northeast, Pennsylvania. Too early to call, 46% of the vote in. Then we go to critical Michigan. Less than half of the vote in. You heard Heidi Prisbella's excellent reporting on the state of Michigan. It's going to be a while. And then Wisconsin. You heard Charlie Sykes, a native of Wisconsin, talk about how it's going to be a while. We're going to bring Mike Murphy into our conversation, a veteran Republican strategist, and it says a lot about strategists like Mike Murphy that he is with Republican voters against Trump. He joins us from Los Angeles. And Mike, stay right there. Don't move, because I want to bring Nicole Wallace into this as well. Nicole, people watching would be forgiven for wondering just what in hell's going on and how long this is going to go, and the state of the zeitgeist and what both campaigns are saying. So you lead off.
So I've heard from folks in both camps that no one expects a result tonight. And I know we've talked a lot about anxiety as an undercurrent. We've also talked about these 3 states that everyone is watching: Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And we now have reporting and people in the states explaining why that might be, that neither campaign expects a result tonight. Heidi, as you said, gave us a great reporting about how Michigan needs 24 more hours before they can report out their count. Pennsylvania is talking about not having those results until another day, not starting with T for Tuesday. And the same goes with Michigan. So I think the fact that both campaigns are expecting this to go on beyond tonight is not cause for alarm. It is part of the conditioning, I think, that both sides tried to give. It doesn't necessarily mean that this heads down a legal path. I guess the Biden campaign says that is still to be determined. The Trump campaign has been more hawkish about legal avenues being pursued. But it does mean that this is going to feel like something that isn't one and done. And I think Mike Murphy and I both have some muscle memory. I think a lot of folks do from the Florida recount. No one is saying it'll go on that long, but we are at least looking at something that doesn't end this evening.
So you guys at least have the Florida recount in common. A lot of Democrats watching have merely sitting in their homes and watching 2016 in common. Mike, which is it?
Well, it's not 2016. I mean, I think if we kind of unwind this, a lot of Democrats were looking for a quick knockout in the Sun Belt where Biden would take a red state away, particularly Florida. And it didn't happen. Now, that said, I was very busy in Florida. It's a state I know well. I did both of Jeb's campaigns down there. And Biden did well. He flipped Jacksonville. He did well in Tampa Bay. He was cooking. But Miami-Dade alone collapsed, and I mean really collapsed. Hillary won that county by 29 points, Obama by nearly 24 points. Biden will be probably getting out of there winning by about 8 or 9 points. It's the biggest swan dive in one county I've ever seen, because everything else was working great. So the good news for the bad news for Biden and for Democratic psychology is the easy break his back tonight win in Florida or Georgia or North Carolina look very unlikely playing on red state turf. There's one red state left in the Sun Belt that I do think is probably going to flip to Joe Biden, which is Arizona. It could be the revenge of Senator John McCain. That's going to take a while. We need to get more vote in, but it looks very promising for Biden. Then we're down to the blue wall. And those states, because they're not used to the kind of absentee wave we're having this year, and because their rules require you to count on Election Day, are going to take a while, like all day tomorrow, maybe even into Thursday morning before we get full numbers. So I've done a lot of Michigan races. I would tell everybody to take a breath and understand they're not going to get instant gratification there because they're not going to be seriously counting, the real bulk of the vote until tomorrow.
Mike, down ballot, what does your gut tell you about whether Mitch McConnell is going to be majority leader or minority leader?
Boy, it's close. They may be one short on the Democratic side of taking it, but I kind of want to see how that Iowa race goes and, and see if Tillis holds on in North Carolina. But it's not as likely as I think conventional wisdom had it 24 hours ago that the Dems would narrowly pick up the Senate. But we also need to see Montana, see what's going on there. We don't have nearly enough vote in.
I think we can be sure that win or lose, Joni Ernst will always hereafter know the break-even price on a bushel of beans. Nicole Wallace has a special guest to bring into this conversation. Nicole?
Are we bringing in?
Not yet.
Oh.
No, this is not yet. First of all, I am interested.
I'm not not in the traffic position here, Brian.
I will turn this car right around.
I was just following orders.
I am going. Sorry. Steve Kornacki, I would like to talk to you about Pennsylvania no matter what anybody else wants to talk about. Now, how much do we have in statewide, and what's going on with the crazy disparities between the counties in terms of what they are reporting?
Yeah, and there are a fair number of counties, as I was saying a few minutes ago, smaller counties generally, a lot of them in the western half of the state. It's Trump country, where you got basically all the vote that's reported out so far. Where you're missing vote is Philadelphia, first of all. Let me show you that. 33% in, core Democratic. What is left here is over 500,000 ballots in Philadelphia. Now, again, Philadelphia, what they are trying to do there tonight is, you see, they report out the same-day vote, the votes that were cast today in Philadelphia. That's part of the reporting that's coming into tonight. They have also reported out some of the mail ballots. They were processing them today. They were processing as many as they could, and they've reported some of those, and they may do some more before the night is over. But that's going to leave them with hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots that, tomorrow, maybe into Thursday, that are going to be reported out. But again, more than 500,000 when all is said and done. They're not done for the night right now, but there's going to be a lot left to be done when the night is over.
In 2016, what was the margin in Philadelphia County? Do we have that easily accessible?
83 to 15.
Okay, all right.
So again, you've got, this is very relative here. You've got Trump's best ballots in Philadelphia. That's why Biden's sitting, I think, at 77% right now. You've got the same-day ballots in Philadelphia. And again, this is this thing. The votes that were cast today are the high water mark for Trump for the types of votes that are cast. So he's probably losing the same day, but he's probably not losing it by anywhere near the margin he's going to lose the early votes by. So you've got a ton. As I say, you've got 500,000 more to come in Philadelphia there, and these suburban counties right outside of it, like a Montgomery County, 350,000 to come. What you're actually looking at here, they've processed some of their mail-in ballots. There are some counties, as I said, in Pennsylvania that actually are processing large numbers of mail-in ballots and getting them out. Montgomery's gotten quite a few out. We got same-day vote to come there. Chester County, we've got a mix. We've got some mail, we've got some same-day, and you got 168,000 to come. So there are a lot of votes to come here in this Philadelphia area. You're talking about just these counties right here plus Philadelphia. You're talking like a third of the state right there. So that's really, I think, throwing off a lot of the numbers you see statewide. The other thing I can draw your attention to here, though, is we say some counties are complete. Here's one that is. This is Scranton. Joe Biden. Joe Biden has made Scranton such a central part of his campaign. What's happening in Scranton, Lackawanna County? Biden wins it. 53.6, Trump 45.2, 8-point margin. So what does that represent for Democrats? Well, that's an improvement from 4 years ago. Hillary Clinton won this only by 3. Biden's getting it by 8 right now. But that's also not what Democrats had been expecting before 2016 in Scranton and in Lackawanna County. Obama won this by 27 points in 2012. Again, this is one of those places that moved dramatically in Trump's direction in 2016. Biden made a little step here tonight back toward what Democrats used to get, but not a huge one. But again, in Pennsylvania, the margin was less than 1 point statewide, in 2016. So any improvement Democrats can pick up in these counties, and if they can get more support, more turnout in those suburban areas, to get a 0.7-point change, that's what they're looking for here to win Pennsylvania. That might help them, but obviously come a long way since 2012 in our politics.
Can I ask you about Armstrong County in Pennsylvania? I've been hearing that there may be some sort of interesting results out of Armstrong.
Let me see what we got here. Interesting is one word. We've had a couple of issues. I'm not going to put it up because we've had a couple issues tonight in Pennsylvania with counties reporting out numbers that I think we were on Lehigh earlier. We were looking at the Lehigh Valley earlier, and there was something very wrong there, and I want to check on that number before I show it. I suspect the same thing just happened.
Thank you for your foresight. Joy, what were you going to ask?
Well, I wanted to see if Steve could do the same thing about Michigan that you just did in Pennsylvania, because I know it's still early and we're not going to get all the vote in tonight. But what have we got in for Michigan, particularly the Flint area?
Yeah, and again, I think you had Heidi on talking about this, where it's getting tricky in Michigan because we're trying to figure out what types of ballots have actually been cast and counted so far in this. So, if you're looking at, let me give you an example here, because I think we've gotten a lot out of Oakland County. I think we've gotten a mix. I will get to Flint, but I want to just show you what I mean. See, we're getting a bit of a mix here in Oakland County. This is a big suburban county just outside of Detroit. This is Biden basically hitting the number that Hillary Clinton hit in 2016. I think this is, as I say, this looks like a pretty decent mix of the two types, and that's what happens. You get a result that makes sense. But in a lot of these counties right now, you're basically getting the same day vote. So, if you were to take a look, like Saginaw is another good example. Here, this is a perfect example, actually. This is all same day vote. And here's Donald Trump at 60%. Again, this was dead even in 2016. Here's Donald Trump running at 60% right now. So it's very uneven in terms of what we're getting from these counties right now.
And Genesee County, do we have time?
So we've got Trump at 53, Biden at 42. And again, you're basically just getting, I'll give you an example here. In 2016, Clinton won this by 9, Trump's winning by 12, but you're basically getting just the same day vote right there. So the mix in these states that we're seeing right now is what's making it so complicated to try to figure out what exactly is going on. As you're seeing it, especially in Michigan, some of these counties, it's a very even mix, and in some of these counties, I think it's very skewed right now.
We are seeing a theme. We are seeing that in Michigan and in Wisconsin and in Pennsylvania, which are the path to 270 that we've been talking about all night in terms of where these campaigns are going to end up.
It's also why you're now hearing at 11:41 from both sides that a winner will not be determined tonight.
Neither campaign expects there to be a result tonight.
Correct. And I think for some more context and to help us sort of put this into a frame that might ease anxiety, we have someone joining us from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's John Mysick. He's the editor-in-chief of the Pennsylvania Capital Star. We've talked before. You were ready for this, for the nation's eyes, the world's eyes, let's face it, turning to Pennsylvania. Tell us, I know you've been on the phone tonight. What is your sense of the state of the race in your state?
Yeah, Nicole, I've just been over here doing box breathing, trying to be patient for this evening. It's as advertised. We went into Tuesday night knowing we weren't going to get a result, and sure enough, we're leaving Tuesday night knowing we're not going to get a result. What we didn't realize was the magnitude of the count. My good friend John Tamari over at the Philadelphia Inquirer is saying that 2.2 million mail-in ballots statewide have yet to be counted. That's about 87% of the total. Those are overwhelmingly Democrats, and 3 of the state's largest counties still have a ton of ballots to count. Philadelphia may be doing another count come midnight and then doesn't plan to do another count until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, joining 7 more counties tomorrow that say they're going to start counting, including Cumberland, which is the home of one of the most closely watched congressional contests in the country.
What did the state, I know Rachel did a great deep dive on the state last night, and the Attorney General is ready, the Biden campaign is ready. Are the citizens of Pennsylvania ready?
They've certainly tried to prepare them. Governor Tom Wolf was, again, he cut that commercial this evening, telling everybody to take deep breaths. I've been seeing a bit of it on my Twitter feed. Some folks were looking at, say, the row office results. That's State Attorney General, State Treasurer, State Auditor General, where there's a wide disparity between the 2 Democratic incumbents and the 1 Democratic challenger in the open seat. Pardon me, and predicting Republican coattails. I've had to talk a couple of people down off the ledge saying that's not the result. We still have some time left to go yet.
Yeah.
It's hard to get people to be patient.
It is. And with so much, I think, hyperventilating on really the president threatening to, quote, send his lawyers in after the polls closed tonight, I think set a tone that has people on edge. And you're right, box breathing. It's in for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, hold for 5. I'm doing it too, my friend. We will come back to you early and often. John Mysick, editor-in-chief of the Pennsylvania Capital Star. Thank you so much.
What is it? In?
You bet.
Okay, so box breathing. I think it's a military
Well, it's
thing.
called 479, I thought. Isn't it?
Who are you? What are we talking about?
You're in for for 4, hold for 7, out for 8.
Yeah,
I do it every day.
Meditation apps. It's the new Valium.
What's the button? It's around and it goes around in sides?
You breathe in, you hold, you breathe out, you exhale.
Oh, there's another one called diaphragmatic breathing, where you like push your belly out when you breathe in, and then let it out when you come out.
Everything's gonna be okay.
So relaxing.
Unless I grow gills, I'm not going to know how to do any of those things. All right, we are going to take a quick break, in part so I can figure out what this nonsense is that you girls are talking about with your lungs.
From Attleboro, Pennsylvania. It's got to be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, I do believe in breathing, just I don't understand this. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I'll tell you, one of the things that I don't understand tonight is why in Nevada, we have 0 vote at this point. Nevada, we have seen Arizona declared too close to call with Biden in the lead by NBC News. We have seen New Mexico called for Joe Biden by NBC News, but Nevada, nothing? Really? What's going on in Nevada? We are going to check in with the guru of Nevada's political press corps when we come back. Stay with us. Arizona and Nevada, both on your screen right now. I said before the break that NBC News is characterizing Arizona as too close to call with Biden in the lead. I was wrong in that. It is too early to call, as the NBC characterization in Arizona. I apologize. Again, Arizona right now projected by NBC News as too early to call, with just over 3/4 of the vote in, but Biden is characterized as being in the lead. That said, look next door. Nevada, too early to call. What do we got in? Wait, where's all the numbers? Where's the big numbers in the bottom and the little number up in the corner? Where is the vote in Nevada? What is going on with the Nevada count? Joining us now in the conversation is the editor of the Nevada Independent, my friend John Ralston, who knows more about Nevada politics than anybody alive who is not a currently serving Nevada politician, and he knows more than most of them, too. John, what's going on in Nevada this evening? We are wondering where your vote is.
Well, would you like some numbers, Rachel? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, please.
I can give you right now is 7. Now, you're saying, what is 7? What is Ralston? I thought he's supposed to be the expert on this stuff. Let me tell you what 7 is. 7 is the number of polling locations in Clark County, which is Las Vegas, the biggest part of the state. They are still open. There are lines outside of them. The polls were supposed to close at 7, Rachel, but the Republicans filed a lawsuit in this upside-down year to try to keep polls open in the Democratic county because they have done better in early voting while the Democrats have crushed them in the mail. As soon as those polling lines are done, they are going to start releasing results, probably mostly from rural Nevada. So let me caution everybody, Rachel, the first numbers you may get are going to be overwhelmingly in favor of Donald Trump, but probably not a large number of votes coming from the 15 relatively small rural counties.
Now, John, I have been reading at the Nevada Independent, I have been reading your prediction columns and your coverage of the early vote every single day. Like every minute that you post something, I'm right there. And I know that you said overall that it's your perception that Democrats built up such a lead with early vote in Clark County that it was essentially an insurmountable lead for the Republicans. In terms of the election day turnout in Clark County, though, is it possible that that has exceeded expectations enough that the Democrats might be keeping Nevada in play?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for all the Rachel clicks on the Nevada Independent site. We appreciate those greatly. Listen, what the most surprising thing about the election day turnout, and we've been tracking that, Rachel, is how small it's been. I expected about 180,000 or so voters to come out in Clark County. It's going to end up being about half of that. The Republicans were hoping for a huge turnout to overcome what is clearly a deficit in the early and mail vote. They were about 48,000 ballots behind statewide, but 90,000 plus in Clark County. And as you know, better than most people, being a student of Nevada politics, the Democrats always do this. They build up enough votes in the Democratic bastion of Clark County that the Republicans can't overcome them. I think that has happened this time as well. But I can tell you the Democrats here are nervous. They're looking at what happened in Florida. They're afraid now that maybe the Latino vote did not come out for Biden the way it did for Hillary Clinton. People get nervous on election nights, Rachel, all the time, even without cause. And I don't think Nevada's much like any other state, and it's probably more like Arizona than it is like Florida. But I've been doing this for a long time, as you mentioned, and usually the vote lead that the Democrats have is enough to win the state, especially since there was such low turnout today. But you know what I'd like to see? The same thing you would like to see, some real numbers.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, John, let me just ask you, you described what's going on in terms of those open polling locations, 7 open polling locations still in Clark County, people still in line to vote, even if the election day voting numbers overall haven't been overwhelming numbers for this day. Given that that's the reason for the delay in Nevada reporting its vote totals, and given the wrangling to try to keep those polling locations over, do you have an estimate as to when those polling locations might finally close? And then we might start getting those first numbers in terms of the time of the evening?
We don't, unfortunately, Rachel. I think it's going to be relatively soon. I saw some numbers pop up while you were talking. So that may mean that those polling locations are closed at 91 to 8. You might as well call it right now.
But no, 300 votes in, right?
These numbers you're going to see are going to be from a rural Nevada. I don't know where those are from, Rachel, but if you actually have numbers, that's either a rural county that has gone rogue and released its numbers before the Secretary of State gave the sign-off, which, by the way, does happen in Nevada. And I can see that that's from a very red county in Nevada. But this doesn't tell you anything. As you can see, it's about 400 votes that have been cast. There's going to be 1.25 million votes cast in Nevada. I'm hoping we're going to start to get Clark County results within the next hour, Rachel, but I've been doing this too long. I say there's no reason for them not to release results, and I'm still saying that 2 hours later. So I don't want to make any predictions on that. I hope soon.
Hey, John, it's Brian. I last saw you in a thriving taxi cab line after a delightful meal in Las Vegas, back when meals in Las Vegas and taxi cab lines were a thing. For all the Americans who visit and love Las Vegas, can you update us on the impact this uncontrolled pandemic has had, and when you think the Strip will be the Strip again and it'll be the economic engine of your state?
It's a great question, Brian. And by the way, that wonderful meal that we had together seems like 3 years ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does.
Really does. Listen, the pandemic has crushed the economy of Nevada because it's essentially so dependent on that road that you just talked about, the Las Vegas Strip. And it was shut down for a few months, and businesses still not come back. And there are people much smarter about this stuff than I am who think it may not be back for a couple of years. The economy here is in big, big trouble. What impact that has had on the election is an outstanding question. The Republicans here have tried to blame the policies of the Democratic governor, Steve Sisolak, and essentially have tried to make him kind of be the shadow replacement for Joe Biden on the ballot. Steve Sisolak has shut down the state. He caused the economic hardship here. Vote for Donald Trump. The polling, Brian, has all shown that Trump is getting more of the blame than Sisolak for the pandemic here. So the Democrats think they will survive that part of it. But if Trump were to end up winning Nevada, I would think that play by the Republicans might have something to do with it and how bad the economy here really is, and it's bad.
John Ralston, the editor of the Nevada Independent and the dean of Nevada political journalism for life. John, thank you so much. I have a feeling we may be back with you as we start to get real numbers out of Nevada. Thanks, my friend. Let's go now back to Steve Kornacki. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, we got a big number here. NBC News is projecting Ohio will go in the Trump column when all the votes are counted. 53-45 race right now. That'll change, that'll fluctuate, but that is our projection. 18 electoral votes, a hugely valuable state in the Donald Trump column.
That had previously been characterized as too early to call with Trump in the lead. But again, Ohio now projecting Trump as the winner of Ohio. In terms of what remains outstanding in closely watched swing states. In Florida right now, I should also remind you that that is being characterized as a Donald Trump lead, even though that state has not been called. Florida has not been called by NBC News, but NBC is describing it as a Trump lead. In terms of other states that we're watching, obviously we are focusing, like you can't believe, on Pennsylvania and Arizona and Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin. In Texas, NBC is also characterizing that state as a Donald Trump lead at this point, but has not yet called it. But one of the states that NBC has not yet characterized a result for, just calling it still just too early to call, is the great state of Georgia. And polls closed in Georgia at 7 p.m. It's been just about exactly 5 hours since then now. Steve, what's going on in Georgia?
Yeah, we said earlier we thought maybe this Atlanta metro area would lag, and that's what's happened. You see Donald Trump with the lead there in the overall vote count statewide. It's a little north of 9 points. It's 372,000 votes for him. The reason for the sort of hovering here, waiting for a result, look where the outstanding vote is. If you could see these bubbles, I mean, it's the Atlanta metro area. It's the core of Democratic strength in Georgia. And so there's a question right now of how many votes are Democrats going to get out of these counties when they come in. Let's take a closer look here and zoom in. Let me take the bubbles off and we can zoom in. Good example here, Fulton County, Atlanta. You know, this is about half the vote. Biden running at 73%. There's 282,000 votes still to come there. You know, just doing math, if you look at the current pace that Biden is winning the same, and he is winning the same day vote in Fulton County, yeah, he could net another 100,000 votes out of Fulton County. You know, if you take a look, let's see here. DeKalb County, this is another one, 300,000 votes. I mean, overwhelmingly Biden here, even in the same day vote that we're seeing. He's winning the same day that we're seeing in DeKalb with about 62% of the vote right now. So again, he could net a lot here. The problem, though, is for Biden, as I say, though, is overall, that same day trend, it does end up catching him even in some blue counties. Here's a good example. Gwinnett County, I was just looking at this. You know, if you look at the early absentee vote that was cast here, we think it was about 59 to 40, the early vote cast in this county. You know, again, compared to overall, Biden's running at 57%. What that means is the same day vote that's been cast here, even though Biden's winning overall sizably, it's about even. Trump is even ahead by about a fraction of a point in the count that we're seeing right now. So it strongly suggests, you know, there's a lot of votes to come here, 114,000. But unless that trend changes, Biden may not get much, you know, in terms of erasing the plurality. So there are enough votes in this Atlanta metro area in particular to really dramatically tighten this statewide race. And this is what we saw. This is what we saw in Georgia in 2018 and 2016. The final margin really came in late when these counties did. But there is a question here if that gap between the early and the same day, even with these Democratic counties having a lot of ballots left, might catch Biden here. He's got to make up 372,000. Again, we'll see. Let's see what comes in a place like Gwinnett. If there's a surprise there, I think that's what he'd need.
Steve, thank you. We have just passed midnight here on the East Coast.
We'll see. Let's see what comes in a place like Gwinnett. If there's a surprise there, I think that's what he'd need.
Steve, thank you. We have just passed midnight here on the East Coast. We're in the heart of the order out west. It's a few minutes after 9 p.m. Here's the way we see it. Hawaii, where thoughts turn on a Tuesday night in a boarded-up Manhattan. Hawaii, 4 electoral votes, too early to call. Florida, 29 electoral votes. We have it as too close to call. Trump leads. North Carolina, too close to call. Texas, too early to call. Trump leads. Pennsylvania, too early to call, period. Michigan, same thing, too early to call. Georgia, too early to call. Arizona, too early to call, Biden leads. Wisconsin, too early to call. Minnesota, too early to call. Iowa, too early to call. Nevada, as we have just cataloged, too early to call. Here's the map. Oh, we have one more. Idaho to Donald Trump, your projected winner. That is no change from the 2016 map. Let's go to tonight's map, which you'll recall hours ago started in all gray without a single state filled in. That is about mirroring how these states have fallen tonight. We have so many in the margins yet to be decided. All indications are it will be days before we know. I am very eager to get to our next guest. He's been kind enough to be on our broadcast several of the past nights to talk about tonight, and that's James Carville. James, I need not remind you, you predicted this would be, hang on, we have a call in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Couldn't even introduce James. The projected winner in the Commonwealth of Virginia is Joe Biden. So, 13 electoral votes in his column, and let's put up where that leaves us on the road to 270 just to remind everybody. And then we'll talk to our friend James. 206 to 136 race right now, and there it may remain rather paralyzed. James, you predicted a night over, done and dusted long before this. How do you view this fight? What's going on?
The first thing is every Democrat just put the razor blades and the Ambien back in the medicine cabinet. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Governor Granholm, my dear friend, said that Michigan is a red mirage. Pennsylvania looks really good. We're going to be fine in Wisconsin. I think a big surprise here is Georgia. Steve Fernacki did a really good job telling people what's out. So I hope that we would know earlier than we did. I think we're going to be just fine. I'm very optimistic. I've been talking to quants all night. People are rerunning the numbers, and we just have to hang in there, and we're going to win this little thing. I promise you. But just, stay up tonight, watch the returns. We're doing a job. I have my Pappy Van Winkle in the back, and I think I'll be able to crack it open. Maybe not tonight as I hope, but I will crack that little puppy open before this is over. I promise.
I'm staring at the roses, Old Glory, and the bottle, and wondering which one is going to take precedence by the time we're off the air. James, what in your view did happen? And I'm not trying to hang you up here, but you and I talk often on the air. What did happen between your prediction of maybe 10 Eastern Time, 10:30? And where we are now, where we may be Thursday the next time we talk?
Well, I think one of the biggest stories was the Latino vote in Florida. If you look beyond Miami-Dade, we perform well. And if you look at Duval, which I think is going to spill over into Georgia, and in every county I see in Georgia, we're doing a little bit better. I'd be the first to say, look, I was more bullish. I feel like that's what I do in life. I always think I'm going to win. I never go into any contest with defeat on my mind. I do not have defeat on my mind. I have really good reasons to think that we're going to be fine. I've talked to a lot of people tonight. It might take a little bit longer than we wanted, but everybody just hang in there. America's coming back, and I feel good about where we are. Of course, I wish we were sitting here cracking open this great bottle of champagne right now, but I'm gonna put it on ice, and I think I'm gonna crack it open about Friday, and I'm optimistic. I really am.
I have to ask, I'm duty bound to ask if the bottle behind you started the night full.
Well, that stuff is about $200 an ounce, and I parse it out pretty good. So I'll be Uncle Pappy. He's not coming out until I'm sure. But right now, I feel good. We just have to wait, and we got to support our lawyers that are out there. We got some fine attorneys, and we're going to have a good lead going into this. There's many reasons. There's more reasons to feel good now, and I've been on the phone with a lot of quants in Georgia, and they feel really good. A lot of DeKalb, a lot of Gwinnett, a lot of Fulton, a lot of Cobb is not in. All of this stuff favors us. Everything I see in Pennsylvania makes me feel good. Governor Granholm feels good about Michigan. Charlie Sykes is on here. He knows more about Wisconsin than I know about Louisiana. He feels good. And just everybody hang in there. We're just going to be fine. We just got to have the attitude of a winner here, and we're going to be a winner.
Rachel Maddow here in New York. I just wanted to jump in and ask you about that mention of the lawyers there. Do you expect that this may be ultimately decided by lawyers fighting it out rather than just by waiting for the count?
Well, I think the count is going to be good for us, and I think they're going to have trouble. You know, they'll try. They'll do everything that they can. I think when the count comes in Pennsylvania, I think we're going to see a lot of stuff later tonight. I got to tell you, these numbers in Montgomery and Delaware and Chester and Bucks are just awesome. And we're running them up pretty good. We're going to run them up more. The Allegheny numbers look really good. And, you know, we just have to, we're accustomed to seeing elections where we knew things a lot earlier than we know it now, Rachel. But we're going to find out a lot, and I suspect what we find out is going to be good. And I think the United States of America is really on the road back. I really do. I'm very optimistic. Of course, I wish we were just popping open this J. Strom champagne right now, but I don't mind putting it on ice. I can wait. I waited 4 years for this. I can wait another 4 days.
Keep that shirt handy, James. James Carville, our guest tonight.
I love the United States, Brian.
Back at you. I'm right there with you. Thank you, James.
Thank you, man.
Steve Kornacki, let me ask you about the one non-state you have covered tonight, this congressional district in Nebraska. Now, I believe that we've got well, you talk me through it, both the significance of it and the actual numbers out of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, think of this sort of as a state for the night, just in that it represents an electoral vote. And you're seeing it here. Biden is leading the 2nd congressional district of Nebraska. This is, basically a 10-point advantage for Joe Biden. So what is left to come in right here, I can tell you, Douglas County, which is Omaha, there's 2 counties that make up this district. Douglas County, Omaha is the one that's left to come in. What's left to come in, according to the county at least, is they have the same-day vote, some of the same-day vote that was cast specifically between the hours of 2 p.m. and poll closing time. They've split these up. They've come up with a schedule. According to the schedule that they put out, there's not any early vote left to come in, so it would be same day that's left here. So obviously you would expect that to favor Trump. In terms of how many votes that is, that's unclear, although I would say that where they are right now in the total number of votes in this district is just about where the final vote count finished in 2016. So obviously we've been seeing turnout up considerably over 2016 in places. So we will see, couple, say 20% above that if what we're seeing elsewhere holds here. And we expect that to favor Trump. But the gap here is 30,000 votes right now. Biden's advantage here. The significance of this just in the road to 270, we're talking about this. If it comes down to this where Trump is able to win in a Georgia, a Florida, a North Carolina, a Texas, you already saw Ohio, then that path is cut off for Biden, and a new one that emerges. We've talked all about Arizona, talked about Wisconsin, Michigan, and then if he got that 2nd congressional district, and he would have to then hold on to Nevada as well. That's the Clinton state he has to hold on to. Minnesota's still outstanding as well here. He has to hold on to those 2, but if he could hold on to the Clinton states, then Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, plus the 2nd congressional district of Nevada would give Joe Biden exactly 270 electoral votes. So that's the significance of it. If everything I just described happened, but he didn't have the 2nd congressional district, he'd be under 270. He'd finish at 269. That would set up the tie scenario. That's where it goes to the House of Representatives. That's a whole other thing. So it's one lonely electoral vote in Nebraska. But given what we've seen happen in these other states tonight, and given the narrowing of Biden's path that's created, it's critical for him to get it.
So, sorry, Steve, to ask you to go back in time, but just show us where Biden is at in terms of trying to get that.
Yeah, so again, let's call it up here.
You said it was about 30,000 votes?
Yeah, his lead is 30,000 votes right now. 271,000 votes have been cast. In 2016, there were get this working. There were 280,000 votes that were, I don't know if that looks like a 280. There are 280,000 votes that were cast in this district for president in 2016. So they got 271. They were a little bit short of the 2016 level. Obviously, we've been seeing elsewhere the turnout is going well past 2016 levels. So there are more votes to come here. And according to the county's website, which has put out a reporting schedule here, they indicate that the votes that are still to come were same-day votes. They were votes that were cast today, specifically after 2 p.m. today. They split the day in half. That's what's to come. So we certainly expect that to be a Republican vote. We're trying to see if we can track down exactly how many of them there will be. Trump would obviously need to make up 30,000 in whatever is left to get the district.
Wow. Okay. We'll be watching it just as closely as you are at this point. Let's bring Michael Steele back into the conversation. Michael Steele, we just heard from James Carville, who said that Democrats should crawl off the ledge. He mentioned both Ambien and razor blades, and I won't go there. But he said that he is still planning on drinking his celebratory hooch. He's just not thinking he's going to get to drink it until Friday. So I put James Carville's take overall in this to you to ask if you're in the same place.
I'm with my brother James. Y'all get off the ledge, baby. Grab yourself a nice little bottle of something. Get ready. Okay? Relax. It's interesting, Rachel, that a lot of folks right now are sort of caught in this Florida mind maze. And I've been telling folks that I've been talking to this evening, just ignore Florida. No one ever put that in the Biden bank. No one did. It's an interesting play. Florida was not even a place where the vice president really went and spent a lot of time because of the dynamics there. Their strategy was to look elsewhere on the map. Remember, the goal from the very beginning is to take back the 3 original bricks, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And along the way to get those bricks, if I could steal in Arizona, I could grab, another state that's currently not in play. That's a good thing. What we're seeing out of Arizona tonight that Steve has put on the table for us is a good thing for Biden right now. You bank that 11, those 11 electoral votes, then you swing up into the upper Midwest with Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and you slide into Pennsylvania, baby, you got the night. It's going to take a little time. So Carville's right. He's right about the timing because of how those votes are going to get counted in Michigan, how they're going to get counted in Pennsylvania. You're seeing the red wall that a lot of folks talked about. Don't worry about the red wall. It ain't as high as you think it is.
Michael Steele, let me ask you about the strategy on the Republican side, because we are now hearing that they are already starting to prepare to go to court in Pennsylvania. It's these ballots that need curing, issues with the ballots, and they're already trying to throw those ballots out. What is your read on that? Is that a sign that they are concerned that the actual, if it's tomorrow, this time comes in, they themselves probably feel that that's going to go Biden's way?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what you're seeing, Rachel. I'm sorry, Joy. It's what you saw earlier on. They sort of telegraphed the move in Pennsylvania. They sort of telegraphed the move in a number of other states where they got the lawyers all lined up. Look what they tried to do in Texas. And I speak of my party and the third party. I just can't believe some of the stuff they're doing to try to keep the ballots from being counted. They tried to throw out 130,000 ballots before they even got counted. So the reality of it is they know where these numbers are headed. They've lined the lawyers up to go in and start attacking the processing of those ballots, to start saying, well, that signature doesn't have an E on the end, or the E doesn't look right. Whatever tactic they can take, because the numbers are not going to be there. I believe, from what I understand, the Biden team is well prepared for that. The boards of elections are prepared for that. They have diligently gone through and tried to avoid a lot of that on the front end, particularly because ballots were coming in so fast and furious and early, so they could cure as much of that as possible. But that won't stop the litigation.
And can I ask you also about the party building aspect of this? Because we're looking at the potential that, you know, depending on how those Midwest states go, Biden is going to run up a lot of popular vote in places that he isn't necessarily going to win. I mean, if he comes very close in a state like Texas, you know, and he does very well in states like Georgia, North Carolina, states where a Democrat doesn't normally do that well, he's going to run up a lot of vote. And he's also, you know, a lot of these races like Jamie Harrison's in South Carolina, like Espy in Mississippi, are building party infrastructure where Democrats, frankly, haven't had any, even in Alabama. I mean, Doug Jones built something there that he wasn't able to win. What would you say to Democrats who are despondent that there wasn't this blue wave all across the South about the party building aspects of what some of these candidates, these Senate candidates like Espy and Jamie Harrison were able to, to build?
These guys are on the frontier. These men and women are out there. They're the trailblazers, because if it's not them in this cycle, which is not in the case of someone like Jamie Harrison, he comes back on the next cycle, in the next senatorial race or the next gubernatorial race or whatever race he decides. He's built that platform, that infrastructure. How do you think Democrats are competitive in Texas today? It was because of what they did along the way in Dallas, in Fort Worth, and elsewhere around the state, where they got voters to sort of rethink how they calculated their vote, rethink how they looked at Democratic candidates in a red state. So don't fret on this. Look at this as the baseline foundation that these candidates are laying out for future races. This is the warning flag for Republicans, that the Democrats have figured out how to build their bench. And they know they may not get it in this race. Look, I'll go back to this point I made a little bit earlier with some folks. If Beto had decided to run in this cycle off of the foundation he built in 2018, you're looking at a different map in Texas tonight. Because that energy brings with it all kinds of other good things. It's not just the money, it's how voters begin to look at the race in toto. And someone like Beto in the race right now would help Biden pull the numbers up for the top of the ticket, as opposed to what a lot of people think conventionally, that the top of the ticket is helping a down ballot candidate. Those of us who know this game and how it really works know what a Beto O'Rourke in a Texas race in 2020 would look like versus 2018. And Texas looks a lot bluer with Beto on the ticket than without in 2020.
Michael Steele, former Republican Party chairman. Sir, thank you very much for your words of calm and encouragement for everybody who's stressed out.
It's just a bottle.
Also, you're a good wine model. I'm just going to say it. All right, let's get it back to Brian. Since we have been talking with Michael Steele, we have learned that Joe Biden is due to be speaking within the next few minutes. Brian? He is indeed. It's going to be the same venue where we saw him accept the nomination, in quotes, during the virtual convention. This was planned for. At least the advance crew set up this as a possible on-camera location for tonight. The White House has a room similarly outfitted with flags and a lectern, though we've learned nothing about any plans by the president to speak. So we'll hear what Joe Biden has to say within the next 30 minutes, certainly, as we keep chasing down, and thanks to our friend Michael Steele for what was really an excellent treatise on the state of the political parties right now these days. Blaine Alexander is live for us in Atlanta. Blaine, we keep reading about slow counts, especially problems in Fulton County. What light can you shed on this?
Yeah, all night, Brian, we've been hearing Steve talk about that cluster of counties near Metro Atlanta that Democrats are really determining will go blue, or they're relying on to go blue. Well, a big part of what they're waiting on to get that final count is actually right there in that arena behind me, State Farm Arena. It's familiar because of early voting, but that's also where all of the county's absentee ballots are being counted, in a room kind of up near the suite level of the arena. Well, there are some delays, and I've spent the better part of the night talking to officials in Fulton County County and across the state, trying to figure out exactly when they're going to get them counted. Now, the latest that we understand is Fulton County says they could spend the better part of the next 2 days making sure that they tabulate all of these ballots that have come in, all of these absentee ballots. But I spoke with other officials who have kind of downplayed that delay and said they're aiming to get it done by the end of the day. So what does that mean for the state of Georgia? Well, it could mean a very big delay because remember, this is the most populous county here in Georgia. It's home of Atlanta, of course. So the big question is, when can they get this done? And it also kind of flies in the face of what the Secretary of State told me earlier today, that they're hoping to have all of these things tabulated across the state by noon tomorrow at the very latest. So remember, Brian, Georgia is facing a lot of eyes, a lot of pressure to get this right, not just because of its status as possibly swinging to blues, as Democrats hope, but because of the fact that we saw what we saw back in June, during the June primary, the debacle. So the Secretary of State called today a good day for Georgia. The lines were slow across the state, but overall, they're hoping to get those numbers done. They're hoping to get them tabulated as soon as possible. But again, it could be more than 2 days at least before we get those absentee ballots counted here in Fulton County. Brian?
Blaine, just a personal note. It's been a 2020 for you guys in Atlanta, hasn't it? I will never forget your reporting the night of the terrible violence. Your mayor goes on to become a national political figure, goes on to have coronavirus visit her home and family. It's been that kind of a year in Atlanta, Georgia.
You know, you couldn't have said it better. I really think that this is kind of the capstone and one of the big pieces that we've seen on top of all of those protests that we saw, on top of the CNN Center getting, blown in and all sorts of destruction there, is what we saw with the June primary. And I think that that took the wind out of a lot of people's sails. They were so frustrated when you saw people sitting outside for hours, some people in the rain, waiting to cast a ballot, that there was frustration, but there was also this kind of sense of determination afterwards to say, look, we're going to figure out something. This can't go on when it comes to November. So I do think that that's a big part of the reason why you saw the early voting numbers that you saw here. And that's also the reason why we saw a big shift, why we saw places like the State Farm Arena opening their doors, the Atlanta Hawks getting in and saying, listen, you can come in and vote here. Whatever it is, we've got to make things better so that they don't look like they did back in June. Brian?
Well, Blaine, whatever it is you're reporting on next, we'll be here watching. Thank you very much for that full briefing from Atlanta. So, Steve Kornacki, you heard it from Blaine. If this were a sitcom, I would have interrupted and said, I'm sorry, I thought for a second there you said the counting will take 2 days. No, she said the counting may take 2 days, and we're hearing that from more than one state.
Yeah, and again, you could just see here what Biden and the Democrats are trying to make up here. I was just noticing the difference here. Trump's lead, it's basically sitting at 300,000. It's come down. We're so focused on the Atlanta metro area. I should note Macon, city of Macon here, Bibb County actually just reported its early absentee vote, and Joe Biden got a big batch of them there. So that did bring him back a little bit closer. But obviously, it is all in this Atlanta metro area. You're talking about Fulton County. Let's give you a sense here. 230,000 votes or so estimated, left to be coming in here. And again, you see the margin Biden's running at, even with the same day vote, seems to be doing extremely well. And then how about this one? Next door, DeKalb County, 277,000 votes to come in. And again, this might even be a stronger area for Joe Biden. So, there are still, it's 500,000 votes between those two places. When you're looking at about 1 million left here statewide to come, we think there is still some room right there. But again, we're just trying to get a grip here, exactly how many ballots we're talking about in this area, exactly what that split is. It's still unclear in some places between the same day and the early. It's definitely a Biden area here, and it's definitely going to bring this margin significantly closer. But the question is, how big is that burst going to be for Joe Biden here? That's what we're trying to get a grip on. And again, this has been, we said it'd be an election night like no other. And this is the thing I got to say all night, looking at Georgia and every other state. It's trying to figure out, trying to determine, are we looking at early vote? Are we looking at same-day vote? Because there's just been an enormous difference between the two. And frankly, it's not always clear immediately what we're looking at. haven't done an election like this before.
Steve, let me just run something by you in terms of the way I understand what we're expecting in terms of the time horizon for this election. As far as I can tell, it seems like we're not a million miles away from a result in Florida and Texas. I'm not talking about NBC News characterizations or anything. I'm just thinking about the amount of the vote that's in. It seems to me like we don't necessarily have dire or super long-term expectations for Arizona, Minnesota, Nevada, Iowa. Like, it doesn't seem like there's any reason to expect that those will be super long horizons. But we are getting explicit, not just warnings, but almost promises that it's going to be multiple days before we get results in Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, you just heard the report on Georgia.
Yeah.
So, there's also, I would just say, I don't want to forget about this one. Let me call it back out here. North Carolina remains uncalled. The margin is 76,000 votes for Donald Trump. Remember, the ballots that are in the mail right now that were postmarked, they will still be counted. We don't know how many there are. So that's another variable we're trying to figure out. How many more ballots are going to come in North Carolina? Could that still plausibly affect the outcome in North Carolina at about 75,000 vote margin? In Wisconsin, we are hearing, I'll show you Milwaukee County here, and I think you were talking about this earlier, core Democratic area. You see a lot of vote left to come. This happened in the 2018 midterm election. It was sometime around this point in the night in the 2018 midterm election, we suddenly got from the city of Milwaukee, we got their absentee vote all reported at once, and it completely changed the race. The Democrat won the governor's race when those votes were reported. I think sometime, I believe I'm hearing about 4 in the morning or so, I think we're going to get the mail-in vote, all the vote from Milwaukee. So I think that could potentially be a very big piece of the puzzle in Wisconsin, because if you're just looking at the Trump lead over Biden here, if you went back to the 2016 level of Democratic support, even in Milwaukee County, that would basically erase that Trump lead, that Trump advantage right now. There are other counties here that Trump could still, gain some vote in here, but I think that's going to be a big one. But you are seeing a lot of the vote come in. The big wild card in Wisconsin, I got the sheet right here, is some of these counties, some of the municipalities, big cities within the counties like Milwaukee, count up their mail-in vote, count up their absentee vote at separate places and report it all out late. And that's what you had happen in Milwaukee back in 2018 in that governor's race when Tony Evers won at the end. And so there are a number of places here. I'm just looking, in Milwaukee County, you got a few, Waukesha County. I think there's 38 or there's 39 of these. These are municipalities, generally larger places that do that sort of separate from the county. And those can come in later in a lot of cases. And I think Milwaukee's going to be one of them.
Steve Kornacki, thank you very much. Let's go to our friend Claire McCaskill, former U.S. Senator from the great state of Missouri, who started off this night quite confident and who has retained the same smile and look of confidence, of course, over the course of the night, as lots of other people who are Democrats or who are rooting for the Democrats have been freaking out. Claire, where do you stand right now in terms of your expectations?
Okay, let me be honest. Obviously, this night did not go exactly like many of us hoped it would. On the other hand, there is still a very easy path to the presidency for Joe Biden through the states where he has focused on. And if you look at those states, Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, and frankly, I think that Georgia is now a total jump ball based on what we're seeing out of Atlanta and those surrounding counties. So I still say, Joe Biden's the only one who's flipped a state so far. And I think there'll be other states that he will flip, and it will all be fine. I'm kind of with James Carville. Everybody chill. Put away the sharp instruments. We're going to be fine. I am more worried about the Senate, although interestingly in Montana, I just took a look, and Steve Bullock has the same number of votes as Donald Trump in Montana, with half the vote counted. 6,000 more votes than Joe Biden. Now you say, well, 6,000, that's not that much, but this is Montana. 6,000 is a lot. So the fact that he is running ahead of Joe Biden by that much may break the streak we've seen where these Senate races all fall in line with how people are voting at the top of the ticket.
Claire, first of all, I'm still recovering from my blow against North Carolina, and I hope that North Carolina ends up being the story of the night. I love North Carolina. I really didn't mean to run afoul of anybody in North Carolina. But the fact is that the Biden campaign is in the exact same sort of place and mood that they were in over the weekend, where their number one path to 270 is to resurrect the blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That plan not thwarted, not delivered any setback other than needing a little more time. After that, it gets a little more murky. Can you talk about what it could, and we should say that would be all they need, especially if Arizona continues to look the way it looks right now. But can you just sort of bring it back to the facts, bring it back to the map?
Well, we were giddy because the map felt like it was expanding. And I think we still have a polling problem in this country. You know, we thought that they had made adjustments and the polling was now absolutely correct. Based on polling, it looked like there were all kinds of different paths we could get there. As it turned out, the one true path is the path that they were most focused on. Give this campaign credit. You know, Joe Biden didn't go to Texas. Everyone was screaming, Joe Biden, go to Texas. Go, Joe Biden, go to Texas. They knew they had to keep their eye on the prize, which were those 3 states. And those 3 states, I believe, will deliver the presidency to Joe Biden just as his campaign planned.
Can I ask you really quickly, Claire, about Arizona? Even though I know it wasn't in the original plan, but it does look like a state that's very promising for Joe Biden. And also in that Senate race, where it does, look very promising also for Mark Kelly. In the end, I am getting some sort of Trump world people who are texting that they already feel like, Donald Trump is who doomed that state because of his relentless attacks on John McCain. Will that end up being one of the stories, that Donald Trump's obsession with the late Senator McCain may be the thing that actually, in the end, if it plays out that way, gives Joe Biden that extra state that he needs?
It could be. And, obviously, all this campaign was about is flipping states that went for Donald Trump to Joe Biden. I know other places have already called Arizona for Joe Biden. I believe that will go in his column without a doubt. And so that's one. And he needs just a few others to flip. And the ones that he's got left are easier than Arizona.
Yeah. I need to jump in here for a second. NBC News is going to change slightly the characterization of the race in one state. It relates to the state of Minnesota. Now, it has been too early to call there. It remains too early to call in the state of Minnesota. But NBC is now adding the characterization that Joe Biden leads in Minnesota. Again, this would not be a flip for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton very, very, very narrowly carried Minnesota in 2016. But the Trump campaign has been gunning for it. And again, the NBC News characterization at this hour is that while it is still too early to call, with just over 3/4 of the vote in, Joe Biden now can be said to be in the lead in that state. Claire, let me ask your reaction to that change in Minnesota.
I'm very confident about Minnesota. Listen, if you talk about knowing Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar knows Minnesota. She could recite to you every library address in every county of every state. This is someone who is very close to her state. She is very confident about what the results will be in Minnesota, and I believe Amy.
In terms of what we are expecting to hear over these next few days, Claire, talk to me about the mental health of Democrats while the Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania results remain outstanding over a couple of days, if that's what happens. And it might not be those states. It might be Georgia. It might be North Carolina. It might be some other things. But talk to me about how Democrats and Republicans might approach that kind of delay differently. We're watching here as Joe Biden's motorcade, I believe, arrives for his expected remarks in the next few minutes.
Yeah, I think the mental health will be fine. I mean, obviously, I think you're going to have some folks that if we do not win the Bullock race and if we do not pull out then they're going to begin to focus on this runoff in Georgia. Clearly, carrying the Senate was a very important thing for the Democratic Party in this election. And clearly, there have been some disappointments in the Senate race. So the mental health around that is probably going to be as difficult or maybe even more difficult than the reality that we're going to have to just be patient. And I think Joe Biden will help us be patient. These votes are going to get counted. They've been cast. They're fully protected. We have good lawyers if Trump tries to pull tricks. And ultimately, the people who voted in those states are going to decide who the president of the United States is.
Well, we are going to hear from Joe Biden, I think, quite shortly. Again, we just saw that motorcade shot in Delaware. But let me shoot it over to Brian here in terms of what we're expecting over these next few minutes. Brian?
Well, I have a question for our friend and colleague, Nicole. It strikes me as the only person among us, Nicole, who has written a statement along the lines of what we are bound to hear from a prominent national politician at a nervous moment to a national television audience as we see a kind of drive-in vigil outside this same venue where Biden accepted the nomination. Tell us, Nicole, what your first two paragraphs would say.
Well, first I have to tell you, the three presidential campaigns I worked on, only one had a result known on election night. In 2000 and 2004, there was no result. And in 2004 is the most similar situation to tonight. Mike McCurry, who worked on the Kerry Edwards campaign, and we were the back channel, and we sort of created a dynamic where we talked to both our candidates and no one said anything that night. This is a different situation. I would imagine Joe Biden will call on his supporters to stay calm, to keep the faith, and promise that all votes have been counted.
Well, look at this. Sorry to interrupt. NBC News is projecting Donald Trump will be the ultimate winner in Florida, and it's 29 electoral votes. Running right now 51-2 to 47-8, separated by just shy of 400,000 votes in what has just become such a hugely valuable, influential, and for the Democrats, vexing state. As Claire McCaskill and others have pointed out tonight to soothe the anxieties of her fellow Democrats, this was never a projected Biden state. It was on the wish list. It was hoped for. You don't send Barack Obama into a state you don't want. But the candidate himself did not make it a personal priority, preferring instead to concentrate on that blue wall we've been discussing, the very same blue wall that may take days to determine this election result. But Florida, where our projection is concerned, is done and dusted for this cycle. Nicole, I interrupted. Please continue.
No, we were talking about what Joe Biden might say tonight, and I'm thinking of this result in Florida as something that might make its way into Joe Biden's comments. Joe Biden has constantly sought to convey that if he is elected, he will be a president for all Americans, not just a president for Democrats, and he may actually see to it to say something about the closeness of this night. But I think his real mission will be to tell his supporters, to reassure them that their votes will be counted, and to call for calm. And I would be surprised if there wasn't some message that came out of the White House. You'd be foolish if you hoped it was that civilized, a call for calm. But I think once Biden says something, it'll be near impossible for Trump to say nothing.
Wilmington, Delaware is the scene. You see people have been invited to, just as we recall when Joe and Dr. Jill Biden appeared outside to kind of a drive-in rally. People have been instructed to bring their cars. And here comes the former vice president, and we'll all see together what his message is.
Your patience is commendable. We knew this was going to go long, but who knew we're going to go into maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even longer. But look, we feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted. But we're feeling good. We're feeling good about where we are. We believe one of the nets has suggested we've already won Arizona, but we're confident about Arizona. That's a turnaround. We also just called it for Minnesota, and we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. And we're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania. Yes. I've been talking to folks in Philly, Allegheny County, Scranton, and they're really encouraged by the turnout and what they see. Look, you know, we could know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer. As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people. And I want to thank every one of you who came out and voted in this election. And by the way, Chris Coons and the Democrats, congratulations here in Delaware. Pardon? Pardon? John Carney. Hey, John, the Gov, yeah, the whole team, man. You've done a great job. And voted. That's a decision of the American people. But I'm optimistic about this outcome. And I want to thank every one of you who came out and voted in this election. And by the way, Chris Coons and the Democrats, congratulations here in Delaware. Pardon? John Carney. Hey, John, the Gov, yeah, the whole team, man. You've done a great job. I'm grateful to the poll workers, to our volunteers, our canvassers, everyone who participated in this democratic process. And I'm grateful to all of my supporters here in Delaware and all across the nation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And folks,
and car horns are the new applause of 2020, at least at some of the political rallies we've seen. So, Joy, Nicole, Rachel.
Your patience. And my grandma, when she was alive, you'll know, Joey, spread it. Keep the faith, guys. We're going to win this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your patience is great. Let's walk over here.
In an era when car horns are the new applause of 2020, at least at some of the political rallies we've seen. So, Joy, Nicole, Rachel, how did those remarks measure against what we thought he might say?
I think, unsurprisingly, Joe Biden was optimistic. He was positive. He projected confidence in the result, and he said what Nicole estimated that he would say, that be patient, we're confident we're going to win. I think that's what the Biden, voters needed to hear. I think that there is just such a deep anxiety out there and a disappointment that we didn't see a huge repudiation of Trumpism, but I think he did what he needed to do. He's come back out for an encore.
I don't know what he just said there.
There's there's a steadiness about the Biden campaign. And throughout those early primaries, Brian, and we were all together on those nights when he had decisive defeat in New Hampshire, decisive defeat in the first two caucuses in Iowa and Nevada. This wasn't a campaign that sort of got rattled. And I think this is where his personal story connected and intersected with his political story. I mean, someone who has suffered the loss of two children and his first wife isn't rattled by a political setback. Nobody likes them, and I'm not saying that. But this was a campaign that was always able to find its footing. And they really, I think I used this earlier in the night, if there's a tortoise and a hare, and I don't think you can, I don't know that there's an appropriate animal for the Trump campaign, so I'm not even going to go there. But the Biden campaign compared to the other Democratic candidacies was always putting one foot in front of the other. And it really was, it was never about the Democratic elites. It was never about the media. I mean, the media counted them out. The Democratic elites counted them out. But Joe Biden has constantly exceeded expectations. I think one of the underreported stories of this cycle is that this is a campaign that is very low key. It has, and I recognize this as a former campaign staffer, it has a habit. You have to imagine there have been some big debates inside this campaign, how long to sort of stay off the trail, what the event should look like. None of those leak, which just suggests, and again, you can't project this out and say they're going to win because they ran a campaign that didn't leak, but they're all good signals, and they also bode well. Things get really dicey when a result isn't known on election night. And this is just a very steady campaign. I happen to believe that campaigns take on the personalities and the demeanors of the people at the top. Joe Biden and Jill Biden and Senator Harris, I mean, they have created a climate where they were confident enough to walk out there tonight and say, guys, you know, we got this. We're optimistic, but we need some more time. We need some patience.
Yep. Joe Biden tonight saying we feel good about where we are. We are on track to win this election. It ain't over till every vote, every ballot is counted, but we're feeling good about where we are. He said one substantive thing about the states that are still in play. He said, we're still in the game in Georgia, and that's not even one we expected. Yeah. That was kind of interesting. And then he said, we could know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take longer. It is not my place or Donald Trump's place to say who won, but I'll tell you, we're optimistic. Keep the faith. We're going to win this. That is a responsible way to approach asking for patience, praising people for being patient, saying, I am not declaring victory here, but I am optimistic, and I need everybody to stick with me, keep the faith. Just immediately in response to that, Donald Trump has now said that he is going to make a statement tonight, and he is already declaring the election a big win for himself. So presumably, President Trump will come out and, like, you know, declare victory. And as Michael Beschloss would put it, he'll declare himself the king of Romania. That doesn't make you the king of Romania. Saying you won isn't the same as winning. But presumably that is what Donald Trump will do.
Rachel, 3 minutes ago, there's another one, quote, we are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed. And in this case, it's capitalized as if someone is closing the Polish people. So we'll look into that.
You know, and when the polls get closed,
it's the
stuff gets weird.
That's a disservice to us all. When one of us is affected, we are all Poles. Let's bring in Lawrence O'Donnell to talk about Lawrence's knowledge of the political process, his knowledge of Joe Biden, having known him way, way back in the U.S. Senate. Lawrence, what did you make of what just happened and juxtapose it against the event we can only guess about coming up from the president?
Well, it sounds like the Trump event is going to be as crazy as we expected it would be at this point. But the Joe Biden speech did surprise me because it's the shortest speech that Joe Biden has ever given. I've been watching him make speeches since the late 1980s on the Senate floor and forward. And there used to be a joke in the Senate when Joe Biden would get up and ask for an hour to speak. The joke used to be, Joe probably has a really good 10 minutes. And then after that, he would just kind of keep going because he is, you know, he can just keep going extemporaneously. I was surprised, actually, rather than just go through exactly where we are in the election in a kind of pundit way, basically echo James Carville, which was necessary, absolutely necessary for him to say he believes he's going to win Pennsylvania, believes he's going to win the election. They still have a chance in Georgia. All of those points were necessary. But I thought a couple of paragraphs about what this campaign was about would also have been in order at this late hour, especially for those supporters who've been waiting out there tonight and hoping that they were going to be participating in a victory celebration. And again, that's a way to remind the country just how different this candidacy is from the Trump candidacy, because there won't be, I think we can be sure, there won't be anything uplifting in whatever Donald Trump has to say tonight. It'll just be crazy dictatorial madness about claiming the crown. But I was surprised that Joe Biden didn't give us a little more about what this campaign is about and what will happen when these numbers are resolved by the end of the week.
Lawrence, we have two bits of news, second part of which refers to your beat tonight. First of all, we are projecting the state of Iowa will go to Donald Trump when all the votes are in and counted. And more than that, Joni Ernst, it appears, is heading back to the U.S. Senate. She was under real and concentrated threat for her seat, had a bad debate appearance days before the calendar day of Election Day, and Joni Ernst, U.S. military veteran, is going back into the U.S. Senate. So, Lawrence, what do you make of those twin developments?
Well, so far, it's a tough night for Chuck Schumer. He was hoping by now to have picked up the 4 seats that he needs to get the majority in the Senate. It is now a real struggle. It is now slipping into what you'd probably call less than likely at this point for the Democrats to win back the Senate. It isn't over, but it would take some surprises. Claire McCaskill pointed out the Montana race is running in a way that is surprising people. That was not ranked as likely that Bullock would be that strong in Montana. But Montana's elected Democratic senators before. The other senator from Montana is a Democrat. So there is a way for a Democrat to win in Montana. But this is one of those situations where there were higher expectations for some of the other candidacies that have not performed as well as Bullock has.
You're saying this is not quite the era of Mike Mansfield?
I mean, look,
John Tester.
They have John Tester now. They had Max Baucus for decades in the Senate. So Montana has always had a Democratic inclination toward the Senate. It just needs the right candidate, and it looks like Bullock may very well be that right candidate.
Rachel?
I want to bring into the conversation now David Plouffe, former Obama campaign manager, as we look both at these Senate races and as we look forward to what we are all, of course, predicting to be inspiring, level-headed, responsible, and civically minded remarks from President Trump tonight, who has also already told us that he's going to claim victory and say the Democrats are stealing it, which will be a cause for national ridicule by everybody who doesn't believe every word that he says. David, what was your reaction to the Biden remarks and your expectations in terms of the president?
I thought they were the right remarks, and I think people just want to know who's going to win the election. So I don't think you want to go and give a version of your stump speech. So I think it urged patience, it urged calmness, and most importantly, he had confidence. He didn't go out there and say, let's just wait till the last vote's counted and we still have a shot. He's saying we think we're going to win. And listen, there's no doubt that, the Texases and Floridas and Iowas of the world in kind of the dream scenario in the presidential race weren't there. But, Joe Biden's leading in Arizona. Donald Trump's home network, Fox, has called it for him. Joe Biden has a significant lead in the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska, which we should all be talking a lot more about. He's considered, I think, the favorite by analysts in Michigan and Wisconsin. And Joe Biden clearly thinks he's got an edge in Pennsylvania. So Donald Trump's going to go out there with that being the reality, where, Joe Biden right now, I think, has a credible case that by tomorrow or by Friday, he will be elected president of the United States. So the landslide's not in the offing. But the path to 270 for Joe Biden remains alive and well. And so I think the fact that he was that confident tonight, I've seen many people give that speech where you're not, all the votes aren't in, not everything's been called, but you know where it's going. And you're much more cautious. And I think the fact that he was so clear that he thought they were going to win means his great campaign team, led by Jen O'Malley Dillon on down, likes what they're seeing in the remaining states and that very important congressional district in Nebraska.
In terms of these expected remarks from the president, I think that the president has undercut the impact of his presumably premature victory declaration by telegraphing it for so long. So I think everybody sort of knows to expect it and is sort of braced for the fact that that will be a false claim by the president if, in fact, he makes that claim tonight. Nevertheless, if he does, in fact, say that, do you think that may create new cross currents or new dynamics that we've never had to deal with before, since we've never had in the modern era presidents claiming victory without the facts being on their side? We've never seen that used as a presidential tactic. Nixon apparently wanted to do it and got talked out of it, but nobody's ever tried it.
Well, Rachel, it's dangerous, it's destructive, and it's depressing that a United States president is going to claim and lie. I mean, he's talking about votes being cast after Election Day. All these votes were cast before Election Day. In Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the vast, vast majority of these votes that are going to be counted were sent in a month ago, 2 weeks ago. So the problem here is not, I don't think it's going to affect the outcome, because these were legally cast votes, and they're going to be counted legally, and the winner of those votes is going to win the presidency. You're going to have 45 to 46% of the country, or close to that, believing what he's saying. Even though on his network on Fox, they're saying Biden won Arizona. He's ahead in the 2nd congressional district of Nebraska. He should be considered the leader in Wisconsin. So that's what I'm concerned about. I'm less concerned about the outcome. But, this is going to be a really, really ugly 24 to 72 hours, something we've never seen in American history. And I agree with you. I think it's more bark than bite, but it's still going to be really hard to watch.
Well, right. And hey, this is Joy. And I think that's the anxiety that people feel, right? That, that we're going to wind up in court in Pennsylvania, that we're going to wind up with the Trump campaign challenging ballots in Arizona or everywhere else, and that, it'll sort of never end. And then it becomes a case of, can we trust the courts, which have been ceded by Mitch McConnell and his senators, some of whom got reelected tonight, as did he. How confident are you that Democrats actually can prevail? I know they've got great lawyers, but how confident are you that if this winds up being a huge, messy battle in the courts, that Democrats can come out of that on top?
Well, Joy, they have great lawyers, and I think to date they've had great success in all the election lawsuits. But listen, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin or didn't count the vote ahead of time, like we saw in most of the other states, by state law. So these states are just following the state law, and they will be producing those votes. And again, these aren't, ballots that were sent in on Saturday that they're going to receive on Thursday. These are all the early vote and mail ballots throughout the period, number one. So I feel confident, despite the court, despite we're going to have an American president basically saying democracy's over in the United States. It's over. I believe I should stay as president. Doesn't matter what the voters said, and I've won the election. So that's going to be ugly, and it's going to be depressing, and it is going to be nerve-wracking. But at the end of the day, these votes are going to be counted, the rest of them in Arizona, in North Carolina, in Georgia, and in those 3 key states, following state law, following established practices.
David Plouffe, former Obama campaign manager. David, thank you very much for being with us. I have a feeling it's not over for you tonight with us, just as it's not over for you at home either, as we close in on the top of the hour at 1 a.m. Eastern time. I think I'm handing this to Brian at this point.
Yep. Well, we got the magic sound coming. We should have the magic whoosh that indicates
I could make the noise, but
top
it'll be
of the hour. There you go. There it is. Now it's official. Rachel, if you wait long enough, you can be awake for poll closing in Alaska.
Woohoo!
It has happened. 3 electoral votes without consequence. Alaska is, in our determination, too early to call. North Carolina, with significantly more electoral votes, is too close to call at this hour. Texas, too early. We have determined Donald Trump leads that race. Pennsylvania, too early. Georgia, too early. Michigan, too early. Arizona, too early. Biden leads. Wisconsin, too early. Minnesota, too early. Biden leads. And Nevada, too early, which leads us with an electoral map thus far that looks like this. 205-171 is where we are. We all know where the states are, where the numbers are that'll plug in those totals. Steve Kornacki has been living in the numbers all evening long. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Brian, and we're keeping an eye here on Wisconsin. And again, looks like about, over 70% of the vote here has been counted in Wisconsin. You see the Trump lead here is 114,000, but a lot of the suspense in Wisconsin right now is coming down here to Milwaukee County, and you can see only 36% of the vote so far. It's a big Biden county, big Democratic county. They had, to give you an example here, in 2016, let's see if I can show this. In 2016, there were 434,000 votes that were cast in this county. Right now, they have tabulated just it went off the screen. Right now, they have tabulated just over 200,000. So they're basically halfway to what they got in 2016. So when you see this lead that Donald Trump has, Milwaukee County is a big thing yet to come. And like I said, we're expecting in a couple of hours, they have the city of Milwaukee itself, some of the other cities, municipalities in Milwaukee County. They count up their absentee ballot. They count that up separately. Then they report that out. So that's what we're expecting, sometime in the next few hours, 3, 4 a.m., something like that. I think we're expecting to get the full vote from Milwaukee County, and that's really what's going to give us the picture of where things land in Wisconsin. There was a governor's race in Wisconsin just 2 years ago. Scott Walker, the Republican incumbent, led all night. It was very narrow. Milwaukee County came in, reported in that late vote, and that is what put Evers over the top. So we're waiting to see that. We're starting to get close to complete results from some of these. Here, they call these the WOW counties right outside of Milwaukee. Just to give you a sense here, these are generally big Republican counties. Trump, most of the vote, just about all the vote in here. Trump a little bit under his 2016 performance. Then you go right next door, some of the vote left. Trump a little bit over his 2016 performance. A lot of Wisconsin is looking a lot like 2016. Democrats were able to squeeze, it looks like, more votes out of Dane County. This is where Madison is, the University of Wisconsin. You can see here Clinton got 71%, Biden doing better, and just extraordinary turnout there for Democrats as well. Conversely, if you took a look up here in the Fox Valley, it's Green Bay, Brown County, Donald Trump right now running 15 points ahead of Joe Biden. He won this by 11. So there might be some progress in this area for Donald Trump. That looks about the same. So, this is kind of nip and tuck in most of the counties around the state right now, with that big gap in Milwaukee County that we just don't know. Trump has what looks like a substantial lead statewide. But really, I think a lot of this in Wisconsin is coming down to what we find out in the next few hours from Milwaukee County.
In terms of when we are going to find out crucial information, we're going to go back to Fulton County, Georgia right now, where our reporter Blaine Alexander apparently has some new reporting on the expectations for that count in Fulton County, where Atlanta is the seat, and what that might mean for the Georgia numbers overall. Blaine, what do you have?
Well, Rachel, we've learned that the counting continues tonight. Right here in State Farm Arena behind me, we've learned that there are 5 people who are still inside, still working to scan those absentee ballots and try and get those numbers tabulated. Now, initially, we were told that everybody went home at about 10:30, but I just got off the phone with the county spokesperson who tells me that indeed there are still some people in there, quite literally burning the midnight oil, scanning ballot after ballot and trying to get that information in. Now, separately, Rachel, we've also learned that there are about 100 100 or so county employees at the county warehouse, not too far away from where we are right now, who are working to tabulate those early in-person ballots. So we've got two different operations happening at the same time. And of course, the big question is, what exactly will this mean for when these votes are tabulated? And we don't know the answer to that yet. I asked the Fulton County spokesperson, and she said she's still pointing to that expectation, that prediction rather, of tabulating over the next 2 days. Of course, that they get it done earlier, that's fantastic, but she was not ready to say that this would have an impact on getting it done. I've also reached out to the county chairman to try and get some information on that. But again, it really underscores just how crucial Fulton County is in this entire puzzle piece when it comes to the state of Georgia. Again, the most populous county, expected to go heavily blue, and waiting to get those numbers in right now. The final piece of this is how long they're going to be counting tonight. Again, they couldn't say how long they're going to be staying up and doing this, but she did tell me this, Rachel. She said, it looks like people are in it for the long haul tonight, and it doesn't look like they're going home anytime soon.
And Blaine, specifically, you said 5 people are inside that building. That's five actual individuals who are working on all the absentees in Fulton County right now? Just 5?
I had to clarify that myself too, Rachel. You know, we actually spent time inside that room, and when we were there were about 3 dozen or so employees who were kind of working, opening, scanning, sorting different sorts of ballots. So what I understand is that most of those people left. We actually saw them leave around 10:30, but the people who have remained are the ones who are scanning those ballots that have already been opened, already been sorted. So that kind of assembly line work has already been done, and now they're taking those piles and scanning those in manually. So yes, about 5 people who were doing that right now. We're told that the rest of the people are going to return tomorrow morning and continue this process. Rachel.
Wow. Talk about having the sort of fate of the nation in your hands. Those 5 people, and as you said, the 100 people at the county warehouse. Blaine Alexander, incredible reporting tonight. The nuts and bolts about what's happening in Georgia as we await those all-important counts from Fulton County. Blaine, thank you so much. God, that is fascinating. Right now, again, to give you the lay of the land, we are awaiting results in a few states where NBC has characterized one of the 2 candidates as being in the lead. NBC has characterized Trump as being in the lead in Texas, even though Texas is not called. NBC News has characterized Joe Biden as being in the lead in both Minnesota and in Arizona, although neither of those have been called. North Carolina, it's too close to call. In Nevada, it is too early to call. In Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, it is too early to call. And again, part of the drama now is that we are waiting to find out what's going to happen in terms of the timeline for when these states are going to report. And as that reporting just moments ago from Blaine suggests, even that is very much in flux. Brian, I'm giving back to you.
Indeed, we have another state call, one of the states you just ran through, and that is Texas. It turns out that Democrats, maybe some of them, spotted a blue mirage in some of the early numbers, and hope overcame facts in this case. Texas remains a red state under Donald Trump, and 52-46 and change is where we have the percentages right now. But here is how it affects the road to 270, because that is a chunk of electoral votes. That's a big hunk of red that now makes a south to north path up through the Dakotas for President Trump. No change here again, but still a big piece of political real estate. Robert Gibbs is back with us, wondering how much closer he is to the liquor cabinet. And Robert, have you changed any of your thoughts, any of the way you view the playing field since last we spoke?
Still no tequila, Brian. Look, I'm still very optimistic. I think you've got 2 big states in the Sun Belt that have gotten very, very interesting. Let's talk about each of them. One, obviously, we just talked about, which is Georgia. I think there's a lot of Atlanta votes still out. Those are big counties: Fulton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Cobb, Clayton. Those are good counties for Joe Biden. And then I think the other big one is Arizona. And what Arizona does, and you've got a pretty nice lead for Joe Biden, might be a while for some of that vote to get in. But that, plus the 1 electoral vote in Nebraska, all of a sudden open up a different pathway for Joe Biden that doesn't necessarily include Pennsylvania. And so Biden started the night with multiple paths. Trump started the night basically with one path, which was holding everything. And while Florida didn't happen, and probably North Carolina isn't going to happen, Ohio and Iowa didn't happen, it still could be that by the wee hours, we're going to get Joe Biden with a second path to the White House. That's the optimism I think Democrats should have right now.
We have another call just since in the time you've been talking. Another big piece of real estate on the map. No flip, no change. As expected, Donald Trump has won the state of Montana with its 3 electoral votes, just under 52, 44 for Joe Biden in Maine. Too early to call, but Biden is leading. Remember, there are all kinds of vagaries about the way Mainers vote in these elections. The congressional district divide, the ranked voting. You see Montana, we just flashed from stripes to solid red. Again, you can see the geographic path, Robert Gibbs, that the president is carving. But again, no changes here. Back to the point you were making about Arizona, for the folks watching at 1:11 a.m. Eastern time, it can fairly be asked, where do you put the timing of certainly knowing more about this?
Well, look, I think you're not going to get some of these upper Midwestern states. I don't think you're going to get Detroit or Milwaukee maybe until 5, 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. So I think it's going to be a while. I think, you know, we've known for a while that those upper Midwestern states were going to have to count their votes only on Election Day. And a couple of places in Michigan got a little bit longer to count them. But we've known that's going to take a while. So without a knockout blow in any of these other states, we knew the election would revert to form. We'd be thinking about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and we knew that would take a while. That looks like where we are right now.
We have another call. It's a small one. It's a mighty one. And that's Rhode Island with its 4 electoral votes. Joe Biden has been projected the winner of Rhode Island. And just as regionalisms have changed and come and gone and developed over the past few election cycles, the Northeast, New England, has become, as you can see reflected on the map, dependable, safe blue ground as for right now. Maine, of course, as we mentioned, remains a question mark. New York, no question about it. Pennsylvania is the next big patch of gray. And Robert Gibbs was just discussing. Robert, is it not a little bit optimistic to say tomorrow morning for some of these counts in some of these older cities?
It could be optimistic. Look, I would, if you're focused on politics, I'd clear your schedule for tomorrow or today. I guess we're here in Wednesday. I do think it's going to be a while, and I think in some of these states, as we've mentioned in Pennsylvania, if votes have been postmarked, but it takes a couple of days to get there, we know the Postal Service has been ordered by a federal judge to find 300,000 ballots that they've been tracking. So again, this is going to take a while. And look, to paraphrase Robert Frost, but not so morbidly, we have miles to go before we sleep.
Yep, I think you got that right. Whoever that Frost guy is, he comes up with a good quote. Robert Gibbs, thank you very much. Steve Kornacki's over at the Wall. Steve, what state are you looking at now?
Well, we're looking within the state of Nebraska because we've been tracking the story of this one electoral vote that actually looms very large here. So let's take a look. If I can call up the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska, maybe 3 times will be a charm here. Here we go. So you see right now Joe Biden is leading this 53 to 45. The margin here for Biden is sitting at 23,000 votes. Here's what we can tell you. You can see they've added votes since last time. There's now more than 300,000 votes that have been cast and recorded here. The county is saying, this is Douglas County, Nebraska, according to their schedule, they have one more update they're going to do for this vote. They are going to be, according to their schedule, more same-day votes, votes that were cast this afternoon. Now, I can tell you there have been, since the last time we checked in here, there have been a couple of updates, also including same-day vote. The effect has been what had been a 30,000 vote Biden lead here has been trimmed to 23,000. About 30,000 votes have been added to this pile from those two updates. We don't know how many are in the last update, but if it's like the previous two that we've seen, very hard to see Trump overtaking Biden there. And again, if that is the last update, we might get some clarity here on Nebraska, too. If Biden hangs on, if Trump doesn't overtake him in the final update that we get out of Nebraska, too, that'd be a flip. That'd be an electoral vote picked up by Joe Biden that Hillary Clinton did not get in 2016. And in fact, if you take a look at the electoral map right here, it'd be the first flip. This is what's happened so far tonight. Now, what I'm going to do here is kind of superimpose to try to give you a sense of the paths here. Biden sitting at 209, Trump sitting at 212. We talked early this night, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, all these opportunities Joe Biden had potentially to score a win early that would just blow this map open. We're obviously in a different place right now. So let me look at it this way. Let me put up what happened in all of these undecided states in 2016. Just if everything stayed the same as let me see if we can get that up there. If everything stayed the same as 2016, I don't know why that's because I'm pressing the wrong button. If everything stayed the same as 2016, right now, as I said, we've had no flips. But if Nebraska 2 does flip, okay, that's an electoral vote to the Democrats. Where else would Biden be looking? We mentioned, let's see what happens in the Atlanta metro area if he can still pull something out there. You got that question of the outstanding ballots still in the mail in North Carolina. Well, that's an awfully big lead that Trump has right there. There's Arizona. This becomes probably the most direct path right now for Joe Biden. If he gets Arizona, you know, and he had that first batch of early vote there that put him ahead. Now he's trying to withstand the Trump strength in the same day vote. But if Biden were to get this district in Nebraska where we almost have all the votes, if he were to get Arizona, you see that would bump him up 244, okay? Take a look here. Wisconsin, as I said, we're expecting right now, if you look at the tally in Wisconsin, Biden's down, and it is close, and Trump is holding on to his strength in a lot of areas in that state. But let's see what happens in a couple hours. We're expecting Milwaukee County, and that's going to have a long way to go in terms of telling us the result here. If Biden were to get it, if he were to get over the top in Wisconsin, those three things, Wisconsin plus Arizona, plus Nebraska 2, say, hold on to Nevada. Then at 254, Michigan would be the big one for him, the most immediate one, because Michigan's got 16. And if he got that, if Biden could pick off Michigan in this scenario, there it would be for him. It would be 270. Again, that is Arizona. You hang on to Nevada. You pick off that one electoral vote in Nebraska 2. You get Wisconsin, where let's see what happens in Milwaukee County in a couple hours. You get Michigan, where, as you've been hearing, the voting is just all over the place. They're trying to get a sense of exactly what's going on there. The only other state we're not really addressing here, let's see, it could be even later, is Pennsylvania. But Biden now is going to have to take, it looks like, potentially some of this Midwest path to the White House we were talking about. Would it come down to that? It's starting to look like it might.
Steve, can I ask you about another state that doesn't award all of its electoral votes to the statewide winner, and that is Maine? We now have a characterization of the presidential race in Maine that it is too early to call, but Biden is in the lead. Is it possible that Trump could be looking at picking up an electoral vote in that northern congressional district in Maine?
Yeah, and it would be, you know, technically he'd be holding on because he won it in 2016 as well. But let's call up, see if we can get that up. Okay, this is the 2nd Congressional District of Maine. This is the much more rural Congressional District of Maine, very blue collar. And again, what you're looking at here, the designation is too early to call. Trump won this district by 10 points in 2016. His lead right now over Joe Biden is sitting at nearly 8 points. You know, there still are some votes to come in here, although I would say tonight, when you start looking at the map and the trends that we've been seeing across different states, Ohio and Iowa, rural areas of the South in particular, it's those blue-collar, rural areas, you know, white voters, blue-collar white voters in particular. Trump has really been asserting strength there that he had in 2016. There was a lot of question coming into tonight if there was going to be slippage there. In a lot of these places we've seen tonight, there hasn't been much slippage. And so far, at least, in the 2nd Congressional District of Maine, still some votes to come. That is nearly an 8-point advantage there for Donald Trump. Again, he won this by 10. And this is one of those places where that had been a big shift from before. Democrats had been winning this every time they'd had it up for an electoral vote. So if Trump does hang on here, he's hanging on to an electoral vote that he won in 2016.
Steve, let me also ask you if we can go diagonally across the entire country and go back to Arizona and Nevada. Two interesting cases there in terms of the count, because for a long time now, for a considerable amount of the night, the NBC projection in Arizona has been that it is too early to call, but Joe Biden is in the lead. And you were just saying that Biden took a big lead with the early votes and is trying to withstand the Trump onslaught in terms of day of votes. And then in Nevada, we spoke with John Ralston earlier about how late the voting how late the counts are being reported out of Nevada. Just get us up to date on both of those states.
Yeah, I mean, Nevada, in a lot of ways, it's a lot like Arizona, where it's gigantic, or at least very large in terms of land area, but so much is just Clark County, where Las Vegas is, Washoe County, where Reno is. Your overwhelming majority of the population is going to be in these two places. There's a lot of space here, but not a lot of votes. And as John was telling you, you've got delays in getting the vote even reported out there. So in the same way, we're kind of all waiting for Maricopa County in Arizona. We're kind of all waiting for Clark County in Nevada right now. And speaking of Maricopa County, we can go back and look, because we said, remember, we saw when that initial batch of vote came in, which had been the absentee vote, the mail-in vote, the early vote, as of this past weekend, all the ballots received until this past weekend, Biden's advantage was about 10. Now they're starting to add to this the same day vote. You can see it on this sort of meter here. Everything in orange here is that initial batch of vote. Now you start to see we're adding the same day vote. This is what's expected to favor Trump. And the question again here is more and more this will be added. Only a very little amount so far. More and more this will be added. How much can Trump make up there? Because again, Maricopa, it's just, you're talking about almost 2/3 of the population in Arizona, almost 2/3 of the voters in Arizona are going to come out of Maricopa County. It's just an enormous, sprawling suburb, essentially. So this is one of those areas that kind of sets the tone for the state. If you win Maricopa, you're probably winning Arizona.
Steve Kornacki, thank you. We're going to take a quick break right now, in part because we are expecting remarks from the president fairly soon. I should tell you that we did hear from Joe Biden within the last hour. We feel good about where we are. We're on track to win this thing, but it ain't over till every vote, every ballot is counted. Keep the faith. We're going to win this. He said in his remarks earlier this hour, it's not my place or Donald Trump's to say who won, but we're optimistic. Well, Joe Biden now echoing that in a tweet he's just sent. It's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare the winner of this election. It is the voters' place. Again, that just posted by Joe Biden. We're expecting remarks from the president that will probably not echo that sentiment. That'll be right on the other side of this break.
Welcome back. Coming up on 1:28 a.m. here in the East, our characterization of the race in Georgia has flipped from too early to call to too close to call. And if you've been following our correspondent Blaine Alexander, her reporting on the counting process, we could be at too close to call for some time. And we are very happy we detailed the electoral situation in the state of Nebraska, for those of you with calculators who were paying attention, because we have a call on Nebraska 2. Steve Kornacki, that district with its one electoral vote, where we're reminded Donald Trump flew in and did a rally looking for that electoral vote. That was the famous evening people had a 3-mile walk in the cold. That has been awarded to Joe Biden, correct?
Yeah, and there it is. We were just going through it. We can call it back up on the screen right here. This is Omaha. Omaha metro area. And again, these are the same numbers we were just looking at. There's one update, I think, to come here, but there weren't too many votes left. This is a district Democrats felt very confident in because we've talked about the growing Democratic strength in suburbs, metropolitan areas. Donald Trump had carried this by just 3 points in 2016. Democrats were very confident they could get it this time. Barack Obama, by the way, back in 2008 when he beat John McCain, also carried this district. It had been Republican since then. It goes back to the Democrats, goes to Biden tonight. Democrats get their first electoral vote out of Nebraska in a dozen years. I mean, how about that, though? Just think about it for a second. I got to check the time here. We're at 1:30 on the East Coast. And for all of our talk before this election about is this state going to flip, is that state going to, the first thing to flip didn't happen until 1:30 tonight. And it's a single congressional district in Nebraska. Otherwise, this map is holding to form from what we saw 4 years ago.
Unbelievable. And still no call. We have a characterization on Maine, too. What do you got? What do you got?
And Georgia, we have been monitoring this in the Atlanta metro area where there's just a ton of outstanding vote, and we're trying to make sense of that. We did just get a bunch in here from Gwinnett County. Okay. Take a look here. There's not much left to come now. We think maybe just a little over 10,000 votes here. Look, Biden's going to win the county. That's going to be progress for Democrats. This was a 6-point Clinton win in 2016. It's going to be upwards of 20 points here for Joe Biden. But what did that do to the statewide tally here? Call that back out. Trump is still ahead by 236,000 votes. I think one of the things we saw here in Gwinnett County is that a lot of these late ballots perhaps were cast same day, and that might have benefited Trump a little bit more because he's doing better with the same day ballot. So again, 236,000 votes. The big outstanding pieces of the puzzle here, still Fulton County where Atlanta is, and still DeKalb County, overwhelmingly Biden, and you've got a ton of votes there as well. So DeKalb, Fulton, I think, really becoming the ball game here in Georgia.
DeKalb, not even 40% in and processed yet. Rachel, the word from our White House folks, the White House pool, is that this is going to be an East Room event, apparently, from the president within the next 30 minutes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but didn't we hear in advance of tonight that the president was going to be convening his sort of election night party, his watch party, at the White House in the East Room, and that it was expected to be several hundred people indoors in D.C. in the middle of the pandemic, which is troubling because of the pandemic. Do we expect him to be speaking in front of a crowded room full of unmasked people who are going to be cheering and breathing in each other's faces?
I think there's every possibility that is the case. From what I understand, the gathering has encompassed parts of the East Room and State Dining Room there on the second floor. He's been upstairs in the residence, it is said, watching the returns, and so we'll get to see that.
It should be noted that the president telegraphed the fact that he was going to falsely claim victory while there was no responsible way to project the outcome of the race, while millions of legitimate votes were still being counted. We haven't heard that explicitly out of the president's mouth tonight, although we're expecting to hear that because of his tweets. But the president already has made demonstrably false claims about the election, talking about the fact that telling his social media followers tonight that he's up big, but the Democrats are trying to steal the election. There are millions of legitimate votes still to be counted. It is a false claim that anybody is trying to steal the election. But the president making those claims tonight is setting the grounds to try to undermine confidence in the count. And the count is not only going to continue tonight, it's going to likely continue for days before we have any projection of what the result were going to be. So, again, this is something that the president telegraphed, that we knew was coming. Therefore, it is not surprising. Just not being surprised by it doesn't mean that you can't be shocked by it still. This is uncharted territory for an American president and for American democracy to have one of the two major party candidates, let alone the incumbent president, saying that the election ought to be over and he ought to be declared the winner, and anybody trying to claim otherwise is stealing it from him. I mean, we expect this, I think, because it's Donald Trump, but we do not expect this of our democracy, and we have yet to see how our democracy will handle that kind of a destabilizing, dangerous, anti-democratic, and indeed authoritarian claim from somebody who has a lot of power in terms of his control of the federal government to try to control how this ongoing count is handled in all these states where it still remains to be resolved.
Yeah, the front page of today's New York Times was an extraordinary statement along these lines. It wasn't the usual, candidates make their final barnstorms through the battlegrounds. It was a front page story with 4 bylines about how Trump, I think the direct quote was, Trump seeing no path to an electoral win plans legal challenge to the vote. And this being Trump, it's not a hidden strategy unearthed by investigative journalism. It's on his Twitter feed.
Yeah.
And I think the counter to this is always to sort of stick with reporting that you already did. I mean, Bob Bauer was waiting for this. He's literally employed thousands of lawyers across the country, and they're ready to deploy to defend the legality of the vote. And the good news is it's not in question that these votes are legal, and there's no doubt that they'll be counted.
Forgive us, the state of Minnesota has been projected to go in the Biden column. It's late at night, but it happened. It got a little wobblier earlier in the evening than a lot of Democrats would have preferred, but as Claire McCaskill pointed out in her prediction that it would go blue, it went blue. That's the margin that we're working on right now, 53.5 to 46 and change. And here is where your road to 270 is, 220, 213, but it's early yet. Sorry, Nicole.
Well, the Minnesota result, I should just note, it's, I think, a sigh of relief for Democrats. They did not think that Minnesota was their biggest vulnerability in those upper Midwest states. But the fact that it went this late before it was called is certainly something.
It's not. I mean, look, that's a nice and comfortable lead. And I think I'm going to go back to something Charlie Sykes said earlier in the night, that the kinds of voters, and Ohio didn't go the Democrats' way, but they're, and again, this came out of Donald Trump's mouth. We know from Donald Trump's mouth that he's bleeding suburban voters, suburban women. So those are the kinds of voters that were repelled by him in Minnesota. They're the counties that he lost in Ohio, and they're the voters that I think the Biden campaign is thinking about when Joe Biden comes out and says, we've got this.
And they felt pretty good about Ohio, I think, for quite a night. I think that is a bit of a heartbreak for the Biden side. But even in Ohio, if you just look at the places where Biden actually ran up votes, it is the same kind of voter again. And I think that, not winning Ohio is not a tragedy, but it is a tragedy for Biden's side. But Trump is not winning in the kind of margins where he's going to be able to make a dent in the popular vote. And I keep coming back to it because part of the psychology that we're feeling tonight is about the state count and looking at the red on the map. Part of the psychology when this is actually over is going to be the popular vote. And there's not much that Donald Trump can do about that when he can't run up a big margin in a state like Texas. If he can't, overwhelm the Democratic candidate in a state like Texas, you're going to see a very different outcome when you start to add up all of those popular votes. We don't even have states like California in it yet. And so it is a weird thing when we are the only country in the world where Joe Biden could, ultimately win the popular vote by 8-9%. And in theory, still be a question whether he's going to be president.
We just had that call from Brian in the Minnesota race, the presidential race in Minnesota. NBC projecting Minnesota as a win for Joe Biden tonight. We're also looking at the Minnesota Senate race. This is something that I raised earlier on the air. This is incumbent Democratic Senator Tina Smith, who faced a strong challenge from a Republican named Jason Lewis. But NBC can now project that Tina Smith has held onto her seat in Minnesota. You see the difference there, just under 200,000 votes with 84% of the vote in. But Tina Smith will be returning to the United States Senate from the great state of Minnesota. We still do have a number of Senate races outstanding, as well as, more states than you'd expect at this point. Maine, Hawaii, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We'd love to hear from you. Brian.
We also have a little bit of a change in characterization in Wisconsin. This is the second in the hour to go from too early to now too close. If you think about it, it's a natural progression for a state that isn't a blowout. We go from not having enough raw information to we're working on raw information. It's just that the margin isn't enough. Steve Kornacki over at the board. Steve, as you look at, can you call up Wisconsin and tell us how they're making up some of the pockets that Charlie Sykes was talking about? I guess Milwaukee County is going to be the driver.
It is, and let me show you the story, the story that's emerged as this picture has kind of filled out in Wisconsin tonight. Let me show you it this way. Let's go back to 2012. There's a reason for this. Look at when Barack Obama won this state. Look at all the blue you saw on this map. Barack Obama won Wisconsin. He won it comfortably in 2012. That is why Donald Trump's victory in this state in 2016 was so surprising. It wasn't thought to be that competitive. Look how much of the blue, I want you to watch this. Look how much of the blue from 2012 turned to red in 2016 with Donald Trump. Okay, he turned a bunch of, like 20 counties, I think it was 22 counties in Wisconsin, Trump turned from blue to red. The question coming into tonight, and some of the polling was suggesting that Joe Biden was making significant inroads with rural white voters, with working class white voters in Wisconsin. Was he going to flip back a good number of these counties that Trump had flipped in 2016? Watch again now. We're going to go from 2016 to tonight. See how many counties flipped from red to blue. Not many. We got one right here. Check this out. Biden's leading it by 1.7 points. In 2016, it was basically a dead even tie. That's the closest thing to a big shift we're seeing on this map tonight. Basically, I can find places on this map. You can find a Dane County where Democrats are very happy with the turnout, where I think they're getting more bang for their buck than they got in 2016. You can find places where Trump's campaign could say, hey, we're up the score a little bit more than we did in 2016. But honestly, I'm looking at this map and I'm seeing a lot of 2016 all over again. And that makes this outstanding vote in Milwaukee County so crucial here. Here's the way to look at this. Where is the outstanding vote in the state? Where is the remaining vote? It's hovering. We got a little bit in Green Bay there, but otherwise it is hovering over Milwaukee here. Then there's a little bit Waukesha outside of it. That's Republican, Kenosha, Racine. But by far the biggest bubble that you're seeing here is Milwaukee. And again, here's your suspense. You want to know if you want to stay up? Who needs to? Of course, you're going to stay up and see what happens. In the next couple hours, I think we're going to get the Milwaukee County vote. And I think that is going to go a long way to telling us whether Joe Biden, now you see it's, let's see, I want to get back to the statewide, whether Joe Biden is able to erase what right now is a 100,000 vote lead for Donald Trump statewide. But honestly, look, this was extremely close in 2016 when Donald Trump won it. He won the state by 0.7 of 1 point. This was extremely close in 2018 when Tony Evers, the Democrat, flipped the state at the gubernatorial level and defeated Scott Walker. That came down to the late night vote in Milwaukee. So again, between 16 and 18 and now, this is a state where you're just not seeing a ton of movement here.
And, of course, the Democrats tried like the Dickens to have their convention there until the uncontrolled pandemic arrived. Pulitzer Prize-winning presidential historian and author John Meacham is part of our coverage at 1:42 a.m. Eastern Time. John, I'm sitting here thinking that other presidents and other candidates have gone to bed on election night and said, in effect, wake me when it's over, because we've had real barn burners. We haven't quite had the circumstances of tonight, and that's where you come in.
Well, this is not uncommon. Almost half the time in the modern era, from 1960 unto this hour, we have gone. Most of America, as Teddy White might put it, has gone to bed without knowing. 1960, 1968, 1976, 2000, 2004, and 2016. So this is not an anomaly. We're a ferociously divided country. One of the remarkable stories of this era is going to be the extent to which Americans were willing to change their minds. And the numbers right now suggest that some Americans were, but perhaps not as many as one might have thought experience would lead them to do at this point.
John, what a unique happenstance that Twitter tonight was the first kind of adult in the room to say, no, Mr. President, that's not right. And in effect saying, if that's what you plan to say, that's a falsehood, as we've been pointing out, and we plan to say if we hear a falsehood. Here's Jack Dorsey's Twitter. He's not a giant in the world of letters. He may have Walt Whitman's beard temporarily during COVID, but he's not a veteran political hand. He's a guy with a successful social media company. But that's what passes for our discourse in 2020.
Well, the marketplace of ideas and the marketplace of technology giveth and taketh away, depending on the half hour, right? The key now is, and I think Vice President Biden expressed it well, keep calm, let's count the votes. You know, this is my view is this is not the episode of a TV show. It would have been lovely to have known everything and shut it down in an ordinary programming hour. But this is too important. It's a big, complicated, disputatious country. But we have a process for this. We have a constitution. We have state laws. The president, of course, predictably tried to roll a grenade in the midst of it on Twitter, and good for Twitter for throwing a flag on that play.
And, of course, Rachel raised this. The president telegraphs for a reason, and he telegraphed that he thought it should be done and declared on election night. What does that do? That just gives the wisp of maybe what's going on anytime after midnight is pure skullduggery, thievery, as he tried to point out.
Right. Right. Count the votes. The votes are legally cast. The volume is not least because we're facing a consuming and ambient pandemic. Let's just take a deep breath here. There's nothing outside the American tradition. There's nothing outside the ordinary conventions of American history that says you have to know the winner by midnight on election night. It's just not there. And for many, many times in our history, this has taken some time. And it's the most vital decision we make together as a country. I remember Andrew Jackson claimed, was the first president really to claim, I am the direct representative of the American people. And this is our collective expression of the national will in terms of who should be ultimately in charge of our affairs. Isn't that worth a couple of days?
I'll let that point simmer and percolate and get picked up by our viewers fortunate enough to hear from a Pulitzer Prize winner at 1:46 a.m. John, thank you. And something less than Jacksonian to say about Steve Kornacki, who's concentrating on Nevada, pulled the lever, and at least 3 cherries worth of vote returns have come in suddenly and without warning. Is that the case, Steve?
Yeah, here we go. Let's get out here to the Silver State. And we said we're waiting on, well, Clark, we can show you. Again, this is a lot like we just saw in Maricopa County a while ago. We got about 3/4 of the vote. We get a lot of the absentee vote in here. Biden to that lead right now, 54-44. And in Reno, Washoe County, again, a similar situation, a lead here of close to 7 points for Biden. I think it's interesting to note this is probably, if you were trying to say, where does Biden want to be in Clark County, compare it to 2016. He wants to be double digits ahead of Hillary Clinton. So that's where he is right now. And in Washoe County, again, here's one where Clinton won by a point in 2016. Biden, at least right now, let's see if that moves a little bit, but Biden out a little bit more comfortably. These are probably places, when you look now what that did to the statewide vote, with 3/4 of the vote in, that leaves Joe Biden up by 50,000 votes at this point. Would need a pretty significant shift there to get Trump over the top on him there. One other I can show you that I was just looking at a minute ago, Georgia, let me get this off the screen here. Georgia, we just got a major update, and I think you can see it if you're looking at the
bunch more vote.
Yeah, remember we were looking not long ago at Trump up by over 300,000. It now sits at 118,000. What just happened here in Georgia? A big one just came in. Let me get this off the screen as well. A big one just came in. A lot of outstanding vote in DeKalb. We still have some to come there, but let's take a look here. You now got about 82,000 votes left. I think this was sitting at about 300,000 before. This is just overwhelmingly going for Joe Biden right here. This is why that statewide gap just closed so much. There is still vote being counted here. And again, whether it's the absentee vote or the same-day vote in DeKalb County, Biden is winning it. He appears to be winning it, either one of those, by at least 70, with at least 70%. So I think you can expect in what still comes in DeKalb, it's going to be heavy for Biden. He's going to net tens of thousands of more votes out of DeKalb, which will cut that lead, certainly, I think, under 100,000 for Trump. Then you would be looking at Fulton County, about 100, this is Atlanta, about 150,000 outstanding votes there. Again, overwhelmingly Democratic, and an opportunity there for Democrats between Fulton and DeKalb to significantly erode that 118,000 vote margin. And then, by the way, we are so focused here on the Atlanta metro area. There are a couple other outstanding pockets of votes in the state. Remember, the bigger the circle, the more outstanding votes there are. They're Democratic areas, Macon, Augusta, down here in Albany, Dougherty County. There are a bunch of opportunities here for Democrats, or a couple of opportunities, I should say, for Democrats to add more votes outside of the Atlanta metro area. So it's really interesting when you look at this. You know, we were thinking early in the night, hey, Democrats might have to wait to get their core area in. They're going to need to really drive up the score here. I mean, this is the kind of thing I can remember late at night in 2018 in the midterm election. This is the map that was starting to come into focus late at night with Stacey Abrams in that governor's race. And you were saying she has made significant progress from where Hillary Clinton was in 2016. Can she get over the top? There are a lot of votes here, and I think it's a very fair question to ask right now. Are there enough votes here to erase all of that 118,000 vote advantage for Donald Trump and to give this to Joe Biden? It's a fair question to ask right now. I'll put it that way.
Well, Steve, this may be a little bit beside the point in the Atlanta area, as you're pointing out that is where the bulk of the outstanding votes are still to come in Georgia. And I know that votes just geographically there are likely to be very Democratic skewing, very pro-Biden votes. But is it worth considering or looking at whether the outstanding votes are election day votes that have yet to be tallied, or early votes? Do we know what that split is for the Atlanta area?
We now, it depends by county here. I mean, this is, DeKalb and Fulton are going to be the two strongest here that are left for Democrats. We think we have a rough sense of it, and here's what I mean. The early vote here in DeKalb, this is roughly what we think is happening there. Yeah. Biden 85, Trump 14. Now, again, overall, Biden's leading 83%. What that means is the same day is more favorable to Trump, less favorable to Biden. But we think what that really means is that Biden's getting about 70% of it. Okay. So if he's getting 70% of that pool of votes, and there's about 82,000 left there, you could see there's the potential there to significantly gain votes. And again, it's a similar dynamic that's playing out in Fulton County right now.
Steve Kornacki, thank you very much. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, obviously we're still watching vote totals come in states like Nevada, in states like Georgia. The night is young. What are you, yawning? Stop it. We'll be right back.